I just started the stream, didn't I? You guys still there? Everyone still here? Oh, Theo's here. Hi. Okay, you guys are here now. So it's 1:23 right now. You're probably wondering why I haven't started this stream, why I'm like 20 minutes late. Hey Rhoda, how's it going? And I was wondering why the last 17 minutes or so nobody has been commenting. So in OBS, there are 3 different little buttons. There's a start streaming, a start broadcast, and a start recording. Thankfully, when you start a stream, the start streaming and the start recording both press automatically, so you don't have to worry about manually hitting record. However, starting broadcast is the one that actually makes you go live. So my recording is going to be 17 minutes longer than the actual stream that you guys are watching right now, because I've just been rambling on for 17 minutes with nobody listening to me. That makes a lot more sense. I was going to say, the IPPC is a lot more quiet than they usually are. They're usually more talkative than this. What's going on? I guess I'll just keep going. And I just realized that I never hit start broadcast, so sorry for making you guys wait all this time, and welcome, I guess. Thank you for bearing in there, as I just was probably just waiting for Ada Gregan to start this whole time. Welcome. On the bright side, I had a really, really good audition just now, and I know pretty well what I'm gonna say, so Max Go-Kart is hanging the laundry. Restart the live in a few minutes. Yeah, so I guess we're gonna start back over again, or for you guys, I'm just gonna start here. Don't worry about the picture up here, by the way, though. That's kind of a little teaser for what we're going to be talking into, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good lord. It's not Eddie Gregan without technical difficulties, right? It feels like home. Hello and welcome. I'm Eddie Gregan, and I am not sure why I'm even doing that intro, because I'm definitely leaving that in the VOD, so there's really no point doing that intro, but I feel like I should anyways. As you can see by the title, we are going to be talking about the power system of JJK, specifically things like cursed energy, cursed spirits. Yeah, get your laughs in. I absolutely deserve it. But we're going to be talking about cursed energy and mainly about the Jujutsu system in general and how it plays into JJK as a thematic story, and just how well it builds different allegories into its story. And not only does it build themes into its story, it builds its story around its themes, which is why its magic system is so well developed and so interesting. Max Godard, Memory, Gregan be like, broadcast without problems or interference. Yeah, impossible. Shadow Monarch, hi, welcome. Very good power system, yes. It's very good in so many more ways than most power systems are good. And if you've watched my channel before, if you haven't, welcome, nice to meet you. I'm Ada Gregan. If you have watched my channel for a little while, then you'll probably know that this isn't going to be a discussion about the technicals or the science about the power system. This is going to be about what the system, how well built the system is, and what it means for the story thematically, because the thematic juice is my favorite juice. So is this ginger tea. Unfortunately, it's decaf, but it is going to do wonders on my throat for the stream. especially since I'm starting after rambling for 17 minutes. Okay, so let's actually dive into this. I'm sure you've watched JJK. If you're watching this stream, if you're on my channel, odds are you know JJK pretty well. You're here for JJK. So just to give a very, very quick rundown, at least so you can see how I understand it. Jujutsu Kaisen is a world where there's basically an extra form of energy in the world. Extra. There's one more than there is in our world. Whereas some stories have it like B magic is introduced into the world at some point and it's like an incident. You'd see something like My Hero Academia. You have JJK, which seems to always have had Jujutsu in it. Or Jujutsu, cursed energy, I suppose. Jujutsu is the techniques. So you have this world that's always had cursed energy, at least as far back as we can tell. At least a century or a millennia, because Sukuna. So one thing that we already get as a result of that is that we get a world that has evolved alongside its magic. We get a world, an urban fantasy story, since it is like that, like Harry Potter, that is filled with a rich history of the same kind of back and forth evolution, symbiosis as, say, biology. The same way that you would watch a predator and a prey, like a deer and a tiger, both evolve over the course of history. We see cursed spirits and humanity's understanding of curses and their utilization of curses, their curse techniques, jujutsu, evolve over time. And particularly, and more importantly to Jujutsu Kaisen, is that we see how the present people look back at the past history, basically, and how Jujutsu is currently evolving compared to how it has historically been. If you've seen my latest JJK reaction, then obviously the main word most present in my comment section is the word conservatism. So yes, that will be a big part of what we're discussing. Oh, I wanted to hear you explain the difference between domain expansion, simple domain, domain amplification, and falling blossom emotion. I barely remember that one. Apparently there's a fifth one, but it would be spoiler. Yeah, funny story about that, actually, Max Godard. I was going to go back and like refresh myself on things like simple domains, domain amplification, and I was going to go back to like season 2 and look through comments, and I'll also maybe even look through the episodes to refresh myself on that stuff. One, I didn't really have a whole lot of time for that, and two, I realized that there was way too much to get caught up on to really do it justice. And I would also have to think about how they fit into like the themes of that I'm going to be presenting here. And in case you can't tell, I am like, this is going to be a lot less of a structured stream than the previous ones. Not only in that I don't really have like materials prepared, but that I'm not going to be like going back and forth between a certain image and like talking through something and then going back over to the chat. So I'm going to kind of stay here and just like talk with you guys, and I'll be able to interact with you actually live. It'll probably help a lot of the whiplash of the previous streams where I would be talking about something, I'd read a comment, and then I'd be talking about some other stuff, and like 5 minutes later, I'd read the reply to that comment because I'm kind of jumping back and forth. This should hopefully help avoid that a little bit, and it's just going to be a little bit more relaxed. In the meantime, you can see this little images up here. I will get to that in a minute, don't you worry. But that'll be in time. I'm sure if you're familiar with JJK, you can already kind of see where I'm going with this, Max Godard particularly, but that's just going to be sitting there and just chilling for now. And actually, if you give me 1 second, I can make chat a little bit bigger because of this. So let me just pull that thing up. There we go. Perfect. Okay. I'll find a way to like add a little background blur behind this chat so that you guys can see it a little better in the VOD, but that's neither here nor there. In fact, cursed energy is the reason for the myths and legends in this series. yeah, that's something that's really interesting about this, and not something that's been explored a whole lot yet. Ironically, I think the way it's been most explored so far, like in the story proper, at least in the anime, is in the opening specials. The probably one of my favorite shots in the Jujutsu Kaisen openings period. Most of my favorite shots are in specials, but excuse me. One of my favorite shots is the mural, is where we are basically in the POV of somebody holding up a candle and shining over the mural with these very artistic, like very historically coded depictions of the disaster curses in past times, and it's really, really cool. Now, if I remember correctly, I think Mahito is actually there too, which I guess wouldn't really be accurate technically, but the idea is, the point's still the same, right? The idea that these things are of legends, these things are of myths, these things are historical, and not just the disaster curses, but cursed energy, cursed spirits. And that's really cool. There's not as much of a perspective on the... I don't want to say this. There's not as much of a perspective of a focus on the passage of time, at least not explicitly in the story, as there is in, say, Frieren. But that's because JJK isn't really focused on that, right? At least not yet. It's more focused on the present day and how people look back on the past. The past, much like how the story in JJK is really in service to its themes, the past of JJK exists mostly in service to the present, which, I mean, you could argue about the real world, right? The past exists in service to the present and what it can teach us, what it means to us. It's unnecessary given what you want to talk about. There are connections between the themes and technicalities of cursed energy, and more importantly, barrier techniques. I'm sure that's not what you were going for. Far more interested in what you have to say. Yeah, I assume you're referring to like the different like types of like domain amplification and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm sure, I have no doubt that there are ways you can spin them to add on to the allegories of whatever you want to apply to the cursed energy, to Jujutsu, to the whole magic system. But that's probably a talk for another day after I've understood this magic system even more and after these have been explored more. No, Shadow Monarch, I don't have any after episode 6 yet. I will be recording episode 7. I'm going to be completely honest, probably in like a day or two, maybe like 2 or 3 days, because I'm really getting back into this and I'm really interested. So I may get back to the daily upload sooner than we expected. Chills with that mural of the disaster curses. Absolutely. Every time it plays in the opening, it's just an absolute joy. Up until now, I believe it hasn't been here since the beginning of the year. For themes regarding the long passage of time, how it affects you, you refer to Frieren. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Frieren's great with the passage of time. I would say JJK focuses on the interpretation of time, on the reflection of time, and how the past and how the present reflects the past. So who amplifies this, or who embodies this best? It's the elders, right? The conservative elder, council of elder fools, as I call them. These people are the best representation and best reflection of the past. And they're also the clearest reflection of the past because, as conservatives tend to do, they see the past as a guiding light towards the future. And they see the future as a potential threat to the past, which is not in and of itself bad. If you are here for a thorough and brutal beatdown of conservatism in general, I'm not here to provide that. Conservatism is going to catch some strays just due to the nature of what we're going to be talking about. But I'm not here, like, this is not going to be a thorough disassembling of conservatism and period. It's purely in service to what we're going to talk about here. And what we're going to talk about here is, of course, the dangers of it, right? Which the Council of Elder Fools represents, and they present that quite well. The council, the elders, I guess I'll just call them the elders. The elders are afraid of change. They are afraid of change even if that change is most likely going to be good. Because any change that is good, that could be good, could also be bad, right? Before I keep going with that, though, I'm going to go back a little bit and talk about, actually in the show, what do I mean when I say they're afraid of change? Well, let's look at the three main characters, or the four main characters that they have a bone to pick with. Our two main boys, Yuji and Yuta, of course, and then we've got Principal Yaga and Gojo, right? All four of them have committed executionable skills effectively by existing, effectively by having the techniques they do. That is already problematic on its own, isn't it? The idea that you could do good, but you could also do bad, so we're going to get rid of you before you can do the bad, is... I feel like I shouldn't have to explain why that's an issue, but given the current political, socio-political, geopolitical, I should say, climate, there's a lot of issues that arise when you try to destroy something because it might be dangerous one day, maybe, right? There's some justification for it, but is there enough? That's up for you to decide. I think what the show does well at presenting with the elders and with the four characters I'm highlighting and with other ones is that there is a very powerful force, both in the real world and in JJK, that wants to crush anything that could potentially be a threat to what we are comfortable with. Hello, Sumknown. Glad you made it. You didn't miss too much. You did miss 17 minutes of waiting for me to go live because I forgot to start the broadcast, even though I started streaming and started recording. So I rambled onto the computer for 17 minutes, and now I'm going to have to take some extra long sips of tea just to regenerate my throat. I'm also having this weird like deja vu thing where you guys are going to have to remind me what I've already said before and what I haven't said yet, because I'm going to get my words twisted and forget what I've said to you guys and what I've only said to myself when no one was listening. So bear with me with that. So we've got the elders, right? And let's do it one by one. Yuji represents a potential fundamental shift in the status quo and a way to get rid of one of the greatest threats in the Jujutsu world, Sukuna. Effectively, the real-life boogeyman of a millennia, right? Sukuna is, yes, he is dealt with. He is currently in he is currently trapped within cursed objects, within like talismans, and they serve their purpose of like keeping other curses away. But do they really? As we talked about in the last stream, if you were there for that, if you haven't, go ahead, check out the VOD for that. The idea of using powerful curses as talismans to keep away weaker curses is so incredibly indicative of the mindset of the elders, of the putting off the problem until tomorrow, because those talismans will eventually wear away, the seal will weaken, and the strong curse spirit will actually become a magnet for other curses. So it will completely not only lose its defensive properties, but it will become a magnet instead. It will attract curses, which just shows how short-sighted, try saying that 5 times fast, it shows how short-sighted the elders are. They want to deal with this problem for now. because long-term solutions, things that will deal with the problem for the foreseeable future, require change, right? Fundamental change. Changes to the status quo, changes to a fundamental system require fundamental changes, naturally. And fundamental changes are scary. Some known, just to catch you up, we unfortunately have not gotten to the meaning of life yet. You are going to be here on time for that. We're talking about, as you can see by the title of the stream, basically the power system of Jujutsu Kaisen, not the actual like technicalities of it. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be talking about domain amplification or simple domains here, but just how Gege uses his power system to aid in his allegorical writing, in his thematic development. Since JJK is a story that, unlike most, has its story as a means to explore its themes rather than themes as a way to enhance its story, it stands to reason, and it has proven itself that the actual power system itself is basically, it can be interpreted in several different allegories, and the more you delve into the power system, the more you can build on those allegories and those analogies. No problem. Talking about weaving themes into power systems is my go-to as of late. My specialty, so to say. Perfect. Then you are right at home here. And as you can see, this is going to be a much more casual stream than the previous ones. I'm just going to be talking right in front of you guys. I'm not going to be pulling up much other than these little images, which I'll get to why I chose this one in a little bit. So I'll be responding to you guys like pretty much live as I'm talking. Now, oh, Alex is back. What did I miss? Not too much. I'm still talking about the elders. Yeah, he missed the meaning of life, but he can watch that on the VOD. So we've got the elders who are afraid of Yuji, right? Because Yuji presents a way for the elders to provide a fundamental change to the status quo of fearing the boogeyman Sukuna and his fingers, which are stopgaps that will eventually attract curses to their locations. Yuji can deal with that, but the elders are scared of him because he could also potentially threaten people. He could be dangerous because he has Sukuna in him. So, execution. Yuta is dangerous in a very different way. He may not have Sukuna in him, but he has a unusual, insanely powerful Shikigami, you could say, or a stand even, in Rika. He has something that is so powerful that aids him that he's been declared as a special grade, a rank that the elders don't really like. He's dangerous, let's execute him. Until they decide they can use him at least to deal with Yuji. Principal Yaga, they tolerated him for a while, but he's clearly dangerous because he could create an army that he clearly hasn't created using his puppets. Execution. Gojo is one of the most powerful and useful tools in the Jujutsu freaking world. He is so incredibly powerful that if he really wanted to, he could dispose of all the elders, and I doubt he'd do more than break a sweat doing it. But he's unruly. He's a gun that could backfire, so at the first chance they had, execution. The elders are terrified of change. They want the past to stay the past. They want the past to be the present. They want the future to also be the present and the past. And we see that with so many people. This is why the elders represent the best view into the passive JJK and into how the past plays into the present, right? It's the fear of moving into the future and moving further away from the past. So how does that all relate into cursed energy? Well, like I said, cursed energy has been something that has been part of the world, that has been part of the world for all of its history, to the point where there are legends built around it. You could say most legends, if not all of them, are built around them. And yet we don't really get to see that too much because this story doesn't marinate in its own past. We don't have multi-episode flashbacks about 500 years ago, at least not yet. I'm sure we'll have plenty of that as we build into our antagonists, who are almost all from the past, interestingly enough. I can't help but feel like there's something there. That's cursed energy. That's the past of cursed energy. In the present, we have our jujutsu, our cursed techniques, right? Actually, give me 1 second. I'm gonna take a little bit more. Gotta pop some pills real quick. I can feel my mind trying to slip away from me, so I had to take some little extra Ritalin. Hey, living dog, how's it going? Glad you could make it. So we're talking about Jujutsu Kaisen. We're talking about specifically its power system, and at the moment, cursed energy, and now cursed techniques. Because cursed techniques, Jujutsu is effectively fighting fire with fire, right? It's how we deal with this force that nothing else can really deal with. We basically need to become the monster to defeat the monster, right? Tale as old as time. This is I won't say it's unique. Like I said, it's tale as old as time, but what's really interesting about this for Jujutsu Kaisen is that, like the rest of JJK, you can look at it from several different lenses. And the allegories and analogies I'm going to be presenting today are obviously not the official ones. There is no official ones. Gege knows how to write his stories. He knows that the best forms of art, the best works of art, are the ones that say the most while saying the least. You could say they imply the most while saying the least. Because the more ambiguous and the more up to interpretation a work of art is, the more and better people will be able to latch onto it, and the more they will discuss it. And that's not like some life hack to getting your stories seen by the public, is finding a way to make them discuss it. It's an essential part of art. There's nothing cooler as an artist than seeing people read your story and come up with interpretations you never even thought of yourself. It's an incredible feeling, and it's why art is as powerful as it is. When it comes to JJK, you can look at cursed energy, at cursed techniques, and you can compare it to see how it compares to your perspective of the show, to whatever allegory you most like to watch it from, or from the different ones that you've seen it from. The two that I've read that I most relate to and that I enjoy the most are actually brought up by Max Godard. And I don't remember if this actual comment, this little screenshot, has it in it. It might just be a different part of this comment or a different one entirely. But Max Godard brought up two really interesting perspectives of cursed energy that I quite like. Actually, no, I believe they are different comments. One of them I brought up, I believe, during the last stream, which is about how cursed energy and curses are basically hatred. Jujutsu Kaisen as a story is a story of hatred, of cycles, and of resentment, of people, of inaction, of people not being willing to change the way things work, and for those things to eventually blow up in your face. From that perspective, if we look at JJK as that sort of analogy, that sort of allegory, then we can look at cursed energy, we can look at cursed techniques, and it becomes pretty clear how this power system, this magic system, plays into that method. So you have cycles of hatred, of violence, and you literally have cursed spirits cursing the world, right? Showing up in places where people have a lot of negative energy, where people are building up this resentment. This creates these cursed spirits, these vile, basically amalgamations of hatred, and they cause destruction, and they lash out at people who aren't even really related to whatever the original idea was, right? You can look at a mob. They might get super angry about because they're like at a protest or something, and if they turn into a riot, how many unrelated people to what they're angry about will get hurt? How many people will pay for their anger, even though those people weren't the people they were angry at? Anger and resentment, especially when it builds up and boils over, has a splash zone. It gets people involved, whether they are willing or not. Cursed spirits arise whenever a large amount of negativity is building up somewhere. They start lashing out and attacking people, and they cause destruction, right? They get people involved. And how does the Jujutsu Society, how do these sorcerers respond to cursed spirits? By taking the negative energy, weaponizing it, and dealing it right back. This story is literally about people weaponizing the fear and resentment that has been building up in the world and attacking each other with it and fighting each other with it. It is a force, it is the only force sorcerers can use to fight against cursed spirits, because there is nothing as powerful as generational hatred, as the resentment of the people. So of course they have to use cursed energy. Of course they have to fight fire with fire. What else is as strong as that, right? Mental health is desperately needed for sorcerers, yeah. And for the society at large, because if everyone got taken care of and everyone got to let go of their negativity and their grudges, then we wouldn't really have to deal with curses, would we? But as they mentioned in Gojo's past arc, there's not really a feasible way you can do that, which is what led Geto to the more extreme options. On the bigger scale, I like the analogy to waste management when it comes to sorcerers and their job. Also, what cursed energy means to them. Thankless job unseen by many, yet very much needed. Of course, on an emotional and thematic level, the accumulation of negativity and generational trauma is better. Yeah, that's... I like that. Like you said, the thematic level, things like negativity and building up resentment is something that is a little more interesting to discuss. However, I think you make a good point. A lot of these stories about like these underground worlds that like our protagonists get introduced to is a lot of these stories do center around the idea that you will not be thanked for your job, that you are doing good for the sake of good, and you will not be recognized for it. More than you will not be recognized for it, you won't even be able to talk about it at your own risk, right? Talk about it at your own risk. Now, that last part may not apply to waste management, other than the fact that if you say I'm a trash compactor, I work in the trash industry, people will probably look at you funny and probably they'll crinkle their nose at you. But it's true. These thankless jobs aren't just in these worlds with underground magic systems, right? It's not just Spider-Man who has to hide his identity in order to maintain his status and maintain his social circles. There are these people who have these jobs. There are these plumbers. There are janitors who probably aren't super vocal about their job, and people who are not recognized for the good they do in the world, just like Jujutsu sorcerers, just like, I don't know, X-Men, just like Harry Potter. So yeah, it's a great analogy that applies to so many of these urban fantasy underground worlds that we don't really think about. these unseen warriors, these heroes even. So yeah, that's a great take. That being said, I will of course be talking more about negativity and stuff because that's very particular to JJK, and I think there's a less obvious subject to be discussed there as the appreciation of people, even though that obviously deserves more than enough discussion and doesn't get nearly enough as it is. Jujutsu Kaisen quite literally translates as war between sorcerers, until it's actually strongly unadvised for sorcerers. Yeah, it's actually a really interesting title because Jujutsu Kaisen is intentionally formatted in a vague way. So, well, what do I mean by that? Well, if you know the Japanese, like the actual kanji they use for it, you'll know it's a little bit different from how you'd expect it to be. The kanji that they use for kaisen isn't actually like a thing. And Alex, correct me if I'm a little bit wrong here, but kaisen using those two kanji isn't actually a word. Kaisen can mean war, but it uses slightly different kanji. Yeah, as you're pointing out here, it's a cyclical battle of sorcery. It's more of Jujutsu Kaisen. It's almost like 3 different words. And as Alex points out here, that's what builds so well into this allegory that we're going to be talking about, right? About these cycles of vengeance, of hatred. You have this cyclical battle between sorcerers, the cyclical battle revolving around Jujutsu, revolving around curses, Ju. You have this constantly repeating cycle of which basically only Toji and now Maki are separate from, where people are weaponizing and wielding hatred against each other. And against cursed spirits, which are embodiments, amalgamations of that hatred of the masses. Exactly, some no, not just between sorcerers either. It's a battle that gets people involved, just as hatred tends to do, as mobs tend to do. Crack my back real quick. And I think that's what's so interesting about this. And I talked more about this in the last stream, but how people like Maki and Toji play into the themes of JJK. I'm trying to walk the line. I'm sure you can tell I'm like dipping my toes back into just repeating the last stream where I just talk about the thematic brilliance of JJK. I'm gotta remind myself this is about the power system, but it's hard to discuss one without discussing the other, right? It's really hard because they're thematic, and it's such a well-developed and intricate allegory. Oh my god, excuse me. It's such a well-developed allegory that you can't really discuss one without discussing the other because they aren't different parts, right? These aren't just like clean chapters. These aren't separate parts of the world that Gege developed on their own. This all is an interconnecting web of themes. So pardon me as you hear the same things I was talking about last stream, because I can't not talk about it while talking about the power system. But let's get back on track to that. So we've got our cursed spirits, we've got our cursed techniques, and we've got our world of conservative elders and of people that they dislike. I've mentioned Yuji, Yuta, Principal, Yaga, and Gojo, the 4 people that you want executed, right? Or exiled, or ideally both. Ideally both. But it's not just people who threaten the current way of things, right? That threaten the current status quo. As we've seen in the latest episode I've seen, season 3, episode 6, we have Kirara and we have Hakari, 2 people who were ostracized by the Jujutsu Society for much less viable and understandable reasons. And I'm going to pull this up just because it looks a little bit nicer. No offense to Max Godard, but that is just a block of text. So I'm going to keep that thing up there so you can look at Mahito's beautiful face and Geto's beautiful chin. Mahito, oh my god, Mahito. The elders desiring to get rid of people who threaten the status quo is almost understandable, right? Because you can understand why they want to preserve the way things are. On the other hand, you have people like Kirara, who have much less potential to upheave the norm, the social norm that we've developed, the world that we have, the society that stands right now. And yet, Kirara has been isolated as well, haven't they? By the way, pardon me as I jump between using he, she, and they. I'm still trying to work on how I should address them. Probably just they, just to keep it, just to include all of them, because they is inherently all-inclusive. So Kirara is an interesting case, and it's pretty obvious that they were introduced to the story for the purpose of developing this argument against the elders. It's almost like we're building out a case against the elders of the Jujutsu Society world, of the Jujutsu world, and we're building out these things. We're building out all these different facets of the Jujutsu elders' conservatism. Kirara, most simply and most plainly, especially for Western audiences, they're either gender expression or just, well, yeah, the gender expression really is the clear enemy of conservatism, right? Especially in today's world. Whether you see them as trans, whether you see them as like a femboy, or whether you see them as representing the cultural backlash, I guess, within Japan of youths, especially that was giving rise during the time that Kirara was introduced, as Alex can talk about. Kirara, from a social perspective, is clearly basically an enemy of conservatism, right? Represents a threat to the way things are, and a backlash against the way things have been. However, when you take it a step further and you look at their techniques, at their jujutsu, it gets even more interesting, if you ask me, because it becomes even more, how do you say? It becomes even less obvious why the conservative elders are against them. So let's look at their technique. It's convoluted, right? You could argue it's a convoluted, contrived mess even. It's so oddly specific and so much less versatile, at least inherently, fundamentally, than something like Nobara's, than something even like Megumi's. These are nice, clean techniques that are easy to use against curses and fit into the nice little box that we have of these are Jujutsu sorcerers fighting against curses. Nice, clean, simple, we love it. Just the way as things should be. Kirara has a technique that is based on the the Southern Star, the Southern Cross, which is a constellation of 4 to 5 stars, where she applies names to 5 different objects, or 5 different names to different objects, that is based on the curse energy of the thing that applied it, which means that a Shikigami and its owner, its sorcerer, will be the same object, and they repel or attract each other depending on their names. And in order to make contact with something else, you have to go through a predetermined order through the stars. And what is this JoJo coded nonsense? Like, even JoJo's doesn't quite go to this degree. And this isn't a criticism at all. Now, you're not wrong if you want to criticize it. I think there's plenty to criticize about it. But I think the convoluted nature of Kirara's technique is kind of the point. Their technique is so far from the clean spirit fight or curse spirit fighting whack-a-mole essence of like Nobata's power that it is scary. If you've seen MHA, there is, especially in the latter half of it, there's a focus on a theorem that's been presented around quirks. The idea that quirks, which appeared suddenly in the world, are quickly evolving and changing as the generations progress and will eventually grow to such a point that they will be uncontainable and they will effectively destroy the world. It's like the quirk doomsday singularity theory, I believe it's called. And that's a large focus of MHA's second half, particularly. I bring that up because that, while in a separate story and fundamentally about different things, is the same line of thinking, really, that the conservative elites of Jujutsu society fear, right? They are afraid of techniques that are different, that are unusual, that are convoluted or connected to technology, or things that represent that Jujutsu society is going in a particular direction and that it won't really come back probably. It's going to keep progressing into the future and not really look back, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is a scary thing. Sumknown just found one of the weirdest translation things he's ever seen. Hiragana used to phonetically spell Swedish phrases. And then translate to English? Oh, speaking of hiragana, or kanji here, Alex says Jujutsu Kaisen. Ju meaning curses, jutsu meaning technique. Yeah, that's why Jujutsu is curse techniques. Kai is to rotate, cycle. And Sen, of course, meaning battle. Yeah. Many people have trouble understanding it at first. I take my hat off to you for understanding it on the first try. I don't think I did. As I'm explaining it to now, it's only after I've read a lot of the comments. Unless you're talking about like when I was actually reacting to it, I was trying to understand it best I could, but I'd say I had like a 70% understanding at the most. But thank you. Some known I do criticize on the Kiara fight for how little it provides in comparison to the other fights in JJK. That's true. That's true. It doesn't provide a whole lot on its own. However, like I said, it is also important in the way it is. I think the fight itself can be criticized for how much screen time it takes, for how little it actually has to offer. However, the main point of it, to highlight Kirara's technique and how convoluted it is, I think is the main point why it has as much space as it does, why it takes up as much screen time as it does. Because it's important, right? It's important to see how convoluted it is to see and properly understand why the elders are so afraid of it, because it's so unnatural, it's so strange, and it's so potentially dangerous. And also, it's not a clean beat 'em up anymore with Kirara's power, is it? Jujutsu is supposed to be about fighting cursed spirits. Having a power that allows you to use cursed energy and drive stakes into it, and then have it hit like a severed arm of a cursed spirit, and then you can affect them like one of those dolls I always forget the names of. That's a really useful power to use against cursed spirits. It doesn't matter how intelligent they are. It doesn't matter what shape they are. If I can get a hold of you or a part of you, I can deal with you. That's a very nice, clean power that nobody can use against cursed spirits. Megumi can summon Shikigami and has control over like shadows and like can sneak into shadows and a freaking ninja. That's really useful. It doesn't matter how smart the cursed spirit is. It doesn't matter like what they're capable of, he can scale his power accordingly to deal with cursed spirits. Kirara has an almost suspiciously anti-human power. And going back to MHA, if you know Hitoshi Shinso with his brainwashing power and how it doesn't like work against robots, Kirara's power, at least the specific nuances of it, is really designed to befuddle sentient opponents. And other than a very, very small minority of, I'm pretty sure, almost just the disaster curses and very few like grade ones like that. What was it called? The grasshopper, the grasshopper curse. Very few of them are sentient, right? Very few of them will get befuddled by Kirara's overly complicated and nuanced technique. Now, does that mean her technique is not useful against cursed spirits? Of course not. She still has like a pocket gojo where nothing can touch her. And if it's not sentient enough to try to figure out how to reach her, it's not going to be smart enough to figure out why its attacks aren't landing. So she is still useful against cursed spirits. I'm not saying she's not. I'm saying that the particulars of her power almost make her seem artificially designed to fight against people, not against cursed spirits. I'm not saying that to put on a tinfoil hat and say she was like artificially made. I am saying that cursed energy is and cursed techniques are evolving with the times and that things are becoming more muddled. This is no longer just a fight against cursed spirits. And this doesn't even necessarily have to be a recent development. For all I know, 500 years ago, there could have been a power like Kirara's, which is insanely specific and highly tailored to killing humans and not cursed spirits. And if these cursed elders were alive back then, if these Jujutsu elders were alive back then, they would probably be just as willing to deal with it because it's different. It's not right. It's not proper. It's not a neatly tailored ability that deals with cursed spirits first and foremost. It's messy. It's different. And if we allow it to permeate Jujutsu society, then more and more of it could pop up. Going back to the social aspect of it, right? About gender identity and gender expression. If we the more we allow it to permeate our society, our culture, the more it will pop up in other places. People will be like, oh, this is okay now. And they will present it. But if we push it away, if we shove it into the background, then we won't have to deal with it. Theoretically. So once you look into looking at it from those nuances, then it becomes really interesting how and why the elders don't accept someone like Kirara for so much more than the obvious social aspect of it. That fight shows us Megumi's intelligence. Yeah, that's true, Shadow Monarch. It is cool how the fight gives us different interactions. Like it shows us how Megumi would interact with not only different people, but also like different environments and different situations. But yeah, it's kind of something we already saw in season 2. So the fight could have been better handled, but the purpose of it to highlight this super nuanced ability and why the elders wouldn't like it is, I think, the main point. And also it's just a really cool fight, so I'm willing to give it a pass for that. But it is a valid critique to hold. The worrying thing is that the Doomsday's theory could come true at some point in the future. Someone could be born with that quirk to create suns, for example, and that's goodbye to the planet's surface. Yeah, referring to MHA, the Doomsday Singularity theory. And by the end of the story, I'm not going to give spoilers, but people are positing that maybe it's already existed, right? Maybe it's already come to pass and it's dangerous. It's a very real potential future, and it's scary. In MHA, there's not really an effort to contain it because there's not really a way to. In Jujutsu Kaisen, we have our elders who are trying to bat down anything that could potentially signal its arrival. Not actually solving the problem, but just like with their talismans, putting it off and keeping it out of sight, out of mind. There's also an element of techniques with connection to older concepts being preferred. Yeah, like straw dolls. That's true. Like you said, like how Nobara's technique, right? It centers around the straw dolls and using them as surrogates to connect to people. Which general technique do you like the most so far? Enforcement, reverse technique, barrier techniques, their derivatives. And which innate technique do you like the most so far? And which one would you like to have? Oh my goodness. Okay, so which one do I like the most so far? That's a good question. I think personally I'm most partial to barrier techniques. I think they're really interesting. I'll ask these questions again in the future. I really like barrier techniques. I really like how the barrier techniques interact with the give and take of jujutsu. Like we saw in season 2, the barrier is stronger if you make the cursed items, cursed objects that create the barrier out in the open. If you leave it outside, right? So it's easier to destroy. The more out in the open it is, the stronger the barrier it is because the more risk there is. And that nuance for like a barrier is something I just have not seen in like other magic systems, and it's really cool. So I definitely like barrier techniques. Obviously, which one I would prefer to have myself, I think a reverse technique would be pretty great. Being a healer would be pretty amazing. And there's some other crazy things you can do with it. And as for the innate techniques, I'll have to get back to you on that one. I'll have to get back to you on that one. There's just too much to consider. Idle Transfiguration is by far the best to have. I don't know about that. I think that is a terrifying power to have. I think that is something that I would more often misuse than use. And I think even if I were to try to use it right, there would be too much trial and error to use it exactly the way I want to. And that trial and error also has a splash zone. So I don't know if I'd want that. I think that'd be more of a curse than a blessing. Pun intended. Idle Transfiguration is incredible, but what I fear is whether it's effective because it's used by Mahito, a cursed spirit who doesn't suffer from the forced transformation of the body. That's another good point. You can test it and experiment with it by using it on yourself. And he doesn't really have to worry about consequences if like you were to use it wrong. For you either need to or you can use it on yourself and go through that agonizing pain and potentially ruining your body because you're not a cursed spirit and you have a much more delicate soul, let's say. Mahito could change Koichi without damaging him. Yeah, Mahito can change people, but also he's had a lot of experience with it. Experience that you would have to build up. And also whether there are consequences or not that are beyond damaging are a whole nother topic. So there's a lot more to consider there. Now, I'm going to be right back, actually. I've got to take a quick restroom break, so I'll be right back, and then we'll go back to talking about the power system. And speaking of Mahito, I'll probably kick things off by going actually over this screenshot that's right here that's been kind of taunting you this whole time. So yes, we are going to be talking about domains. All right. As expected, looks like most of you are talking about idle transfiguration and the absolute. Oh god, how horrible that would be. Jeez. I almost wrote a name that would be a spoiler. Got so interested in the question of what CT would be good to have. Remember, Gojo surpassed Jujutsu regulations. Yeah, and where did that get him? He is not exactly appreciated for going around regulations, is he? I wonder if it would work to the extreme like Mahito does when he turns his body into something like chewing gum, Blade's animal transformations. I would say that if you were a human, I think we'd agree idle transfiguration would not work the same way. Like we would not, if I had it, I would probably not be able to turn myself into like an animal, because I mean the key for him is that he has a good grasp on his soul, right? And due to him being a cursed spirit, he can manipulate his soul and he can do certain things with it that humans simply can't do. So he can transform his body, the chamber of his soul, a lot more freely than a human could, because he is a cursed spirit, and also because he's aware of his soul. So I don't think we would have nearly as much flexibility as Mahito would, figuratively and literally. Though it is true that it's the best healing technique that exists to this day in the story. If you can master it, it's incredibly useful. Okay. So let's go back into this power system. It's finally time to talk about domains and talk about how curse techniques, how jujutsu is specifically tailored to people, and how that has to do what that has to do with reality and people's realities. This screenshot, as all of you can probably recognize, is from season 2. It's from right before Gojo gets sealed. And it builds on the idea that a domain is much like a technique specifically tailored to one person, right? It's similar to quirks in that sense. You have your own specific technique, and the domain, especially your domain, is the ultimate representation of that. It's the ultimate expression, that's the word. It's the ultimate expression of your specific techniques. Your domain is your inner world, expressed externally. Now, most domains, when you use domain expansion, create this reality marble-esque spherical marble, right? It's very similar to reality marbles. It creates a world that sort of overlaps with the real world and allows you to fully express yourself and be yourself, which has a lot of interesting thematic and allegorical implications. Most simply, there's the idea that jujutsu is the strength of a sorcerer, right? One's jujutsu, their curse techniques, their power is largely determined by their ego, how strong they are, how focused on themselves they are, and basically almost how primal they are. The more ego you have, the stronger your power is. The more defined of a self you have, and the more you work for that self, the stronger you will be in this world. This is not your typical shonen world that rewards the power of friendship and fighting for others. In fact, if anything, it actively rails against them. This is most obvious in Sukuna, right? He's about as egotistical, egomaniacal even, as you can be, and as a result, he becomes the world's boogeyman. He becomes incredibly powerful. He becomes stronger than basically anyone else. The idea of ego equating strength is also a very clever way by Gege to make our antagonists stronger than most of our protagonists, because most of our antagonists are more egomaniacal than our protagonists, right? Duh. And it's a clever sort of way to use that and to make their power directly correlational or directly even causated by their ego. A domain is, well, you could argue that a domain is their ego given form. Their ego, your inner world, your perception of yourself. Pardon me to all of my Freudian fanboys in the comments. I'm going to be butchering the concept of ego as like a psychological term. I'm just going to be using it in the general like layman's term. Your ego is your inner world, right? It's your personal self. It's your sense of self. Your domain is also your inner world. So it makes sense that those two are directly related, right? They're directly correlated. However, the ego does not exist. Well, the ego cannot exist in the world. The ego cannot exist in its purest, undefended, unguarded form in the real world. The real world is simply too harsh, and the ego needs protection, otherwise it will be destroyed. And before I continue, there is some crazy things going on in the comments. It looks like you are just having a grand old time being manga readers, it looks like. So I'm not going to comment too much on that stuff. I'm just... Max Godard came in at quite an interesting time as I'm talking about Freud, and these people are talking about Mojulo, who I don't think I know. Unless I'm saying I'm just bad with names. But your domain is your ego, right? It is your personal world. The ego cannot exist in the world unguarded, undefended. It needs things to surround it, to protect it. We cannot exist as our purest selves out in the world, not in the real world. We need something to protect us. We put up guards, right? We put up barriers, if you would. We put up defenses, and we put on masks. We put on different masks for different situations because we cannot exist unguarded in front of the real world. So how do we represent our full selves? And I'll get there, Alex, don't you worry. How do we represent our full selves? How do we expose our domains to the world for others to see? How do we expose our true jujutsu to the world? Well, we need to use our domain expansion. We need to create a miniature world within our world to overlay over the world that allows us to basically be ourselves, and that allows us to gain an incredibly strong power of being true to ourselves, right? We need a power that is true to ourselves to become our strongest selves, because being true to ourselves is feeding into our ego. So it makes sense that your ultimate power is summoning your domain. And yeah, thank you, Alex, for monitoring spoilers. For any of you who aren't familiar, I'm currently on season 3, episode 6, and I have not read the manga. So anything beyond that, please do keep out of here. Thank you for my mods for keeping a track on that. So we need these things in check. We need to watch over these things. We need to summon our domain in order to have our strongest power. That's why we have these little circles, these reality marbles, if you would. And that's why most characters do not have free reign to use their domain in the open world. Except for one, as far as we know. Alex already called it out here. Which character in our world, in this world, has the strongest ego? Well, Sukuna, the boogeyman. He uses his domain expansion, but he doesn't create his little reality marble. He just decides how much range his domain is going to interfere with the world, which plays even further into the idea of ego, right? How much are you willing to overlap with the world? How much are you willing to interrupt the world around you with your own internal world? How much are you willing to disrupt the world? How big is your ego? How big is your domain? For Sukuna, it's as big as he wants it to be, as far as we can tell. But for everyone else, we create little spheres of which we can be ourselves and we can be our strongest selves. We can connect most with our ego. We can have our techniques that are surefire to hit, right? And even taking a step back, only the people, not everyone has a domain, right? Or at least has access to a domain expansion. It is something that is already difficult to unlock. So that is domains from the perspective of ego. And now we get to finally dive into why I have this picture here, why I have this screenshot from season 2 of Mahito and Brain talking about different worlds operating differently depending on your technique. Because we're going to step away from ego now, and we're going to just talk about techniques, jujutsu, and domains. And we're going to talk about reality. And ironically, as we're talking about Mahito, I'm going to get rid of him for a second because I'm going to pull up a incredibly good comment. Sorry, I'm not more artistic with this. It's just kind of a big text blob. This is by Max Godard in, I believe, my 3.5 reaction. He posted this comment. And I'm going to read out some of it just so you can see the parts that I'm mainly referring to. So let's take a look at what Max actually has to say here. Gege was very smart when choosing to call the power system for his shonen series Cursed Energy and calling the main enemy curses, curse spirits. Curse has many meanings in real life. Yaga uses it as to curse someone before his death more directly. It is the moment when you are dying, when the most amount of curse energy is being output because your soul is leaving the body. Your soul, which is like the center of your cursed energy, right? However, in the second paragraph, he talks about an infamous occultist, apparently, Aleister Crowley, who is famous or infamous for saying that magic is the art and science of inflicting change to the world in accordance with the will. So the point of this is that you are changing the world by using jujutsu. The very existence of jujutsu, cursed energy itself, is, in this allegorical lens, a means of which we are changing the world. We are frustrated with the world and our inability to change it, and this energy is a coalition of that desire to change it. And it is our means to, however roughly, inflict our change upon the world. And I guess I wasn't lying about talking about getting rid of the ego just yet, because we're back to it, right? It's the ego. It's how much are you willing to change the world? Now, finally, Mahito gets the spotlight here, because I want to talk about reality. Domain expansion, train of thought, the easiest domain to possibly interrupt. And yes, that was intentional that I stopped my train of thought right there to comment on that because it's perfect. Oh my God, Max Godard, you've seen a certain magical index? Absolutely. I mean, you may have even read it. I haven't. I've seen the first 3 seasons. It's just pretty solid. I like Railgun more. I'm pretty sure if I read Index, I'd like that one more because apparently it's really good and it just got butchered in the adaptation. But it's a really interesting world and it's a really cool developed magic system. I really need to actually read it sometime so I can get the proper story and appreciate it as it was meant to be. Within a barrier, we just have to negate our enemy's ego, not the whole collective consciousness. Which is why, oh Lord, not that convoluted mess of a comment. No! Don't worry, I only said the best parts. It's more straightforward or less convoluted than you think. It's really useful. I won't explain why in a second though, because Alex has to bring up Nasu. Every time I see that word, I've got to stop what I'm doing and look at it. Nasu was partially inspired by Crowley's system to create the magecraft and magic of his verse. That's not that surprising, actually. That makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, since the idea of inflicting change upon the world is the idea that magic is you changing the world is, I mean, it's large, right? It's easy to apply, and it makes a lot of sense. Or at least it fits very well into the idea of defining magic, which is a historically difficult thing to define. Okay, I'm going to activate my own domain. I'm going to bring myself back onto my train of thought, and we are finally going to bring up Mahito here. Except not really, because I don't care about Mahito, I care about what he has to say. In this conversation between Mahito and Geto, they talk about how Mahito just very casually brings up the idea that the world operates differently depending on which technique, depending on who is viewing it, right? Your technique effectively dictates your reality. And Geto summarizes this by saying, our realities are different based on technique and personality. This touches into a lot of things. This touches into the idea that maybe we're all in a simulation and that each of us is in our literal own reality. There's the idea that, and this is another part I think from Max Godard's comment that I didn't include here, the idea that a reality is comprised of different people clashing into each other. That's kind of why Yaga needs 3 copies of souls to create a sentient cursed puppet, because you need observation. Reality is different personalities clashing into each other, different perspectives clashing into each other. You need 2 people to make a universe, right? So however you want to take this analogy, the idea is that more than metaphorically, your technique, your cursed energy, your domain literally creates your own reality. And our realities, the realities of all like 8 billion of us, overlap to create the world that we experience. Now, does that make this world an illusion? Does that make this world a mess of convolution, contrivance, and contrarianism? Maybe. That's not the point why I'm bringing up here. The point is that this concept, which obviously isn't new to JJK, it's something that people have talked about for a very long time, philosophers, psychologists, everyone, the idea that reality is constantly changing and that we change reality by interacting with it, and that we bring our own reality into our shared reality, if you would, and just by interacting, we are changing it. You can look at the double slit experiment. It showed that, to the public, it showed that when you are observing light as a particle, as a wave, once you observe it, it seems to transform into a particle. And it's almost like it's shy and it doesn't like being watched. That's not quite right, is it? The actual experiment showed that the very act of observing the light collapses its wave function into a particle. Because in order to observe something, you need to interact, right? In order to look at something, it's just like shining a light. You need to interact with that particle to observe it. There is no such thing as a non-interactive observance, and it is that interaction of particles that causes it to change and become defined. Living Dog tried to read the double slit experiment comment, but it was too long and I have a TikTok brain. Understandable. I don't know why you're here though, because I do not feed TikTok brains at all. I don't know how you've been a part of my channel as long as you have. Hold on, let me find a Minecraft parkour run that I can play on here just to keep your attention. I'm too lazy for that. Screw that. I'm glad you're here anyways. I'm probably not TikTok-y enough for you, but I appreciate it nonetheless. But yeah, I basically summarized it right there. It's simply that observing something is interacting with it. And it is that interaction that changes it from a wave to a particle. It makes it basically compress down into a defined place. It is the interaction that defines it. Similarly, if you think of each person as having their own reality, their own domain, yes, I need to use these keywords. I need to make sure to use them enough just so that people who aren't interested in philosophy and are here for JJK can stay tuned in. I've got to Like, I gotta dingle some keys in front of you. Ooh, Sukuna. Ooh, domain expansion. Yuji. So stupid. Imagine everyone has their own like invisible reality sphere around them, their reality marble, if you would. And if you're a JJK brain, they have their own domain around them that's unactivated, but it's always present surrounding them. When they interact with somebody, these two domains, these two marbles, these two realities collide. And rather than colliding and like exploding, they collide and they both transform each other. They both, like, God, we're going metaphors within metaphors within metaphors within a simile, like two ripples in a pond. Thank you, some known Markiplier, jingle, jingle, jingle. Like two waves in a pond, when two ripples, when they interact, they distort, right? They don't destroy each other necessarily, not unless they're like perfect frequency or perfect wavelength. They distort each other and they morph and they create something new. So when two realities interact, when two domains interact, they create something new. And yes, I hear you, JJK fanboy, saying, no, when two domains interact, the stronger one wins over. That's referring to domain expansions. I mean, the general vague domain that always exists. Our reality is created by all these different interacting domains, all these different realities. If that is the case, then who are we to argue that we don't live in the same reality and different realities simultaneously? Who's to say that we are all experiencing the same shared reality, but it still operates differently for each of us within our own little reality? Who's to say that Mahito isn't right? What if the world does operate differently? We all have our own internal worlds. Our world is created by the interaction of our different worlds, our domains. So who's to say that this isn't the case? If you want to get, and to bring it back down to earth a little bit, to be a little less philosophical, let's talk about egos. The atmosphere of your office, if you're an office worker, the atmosphere of your office is dictated by the different personalities, the different interactions, right? The different egos and the different desires, the different personalities. The atmosphere is shifted by that, and it changes depending on how people interact. So the world changes depending on interaction. How is that any different for techniques and for the reality we see? It's some high concept stuff, but it shows that there is a lot more to this world and to Gege's presentation and consideration of this world that meets the eye, right? We've kind of stepped away from what we originally talked about, the hatred and the cycles of resentment, that the allegory that we started with. And that's why before that, I brought up the disclaimer, and this may be something you missed, some known. I brought up the disclaimer that JJK is very intentionally vague and ambiguous with its allegories. You can look at the story, and one thing that's not up to interpretation is that the story is built in service to its themes, right? Whereas most stories add themes to enhance the story, JJK's story exists solely to enhance the themes that is being presented by Gege, by Akutami. So the different I just had a brain fart there. So the reason why I'm jumping between allegories and why I'm not just expressing one for this stream is because that's kind of the point. Gege very clearly built his world in a way that you can interpret it how you'd like, because what makes any good story truly good, or at least what makes most stories truly good, is that they are open to interpretation. You can read it however you like. You can take whatever allegory from it that you like. I think that's the shortcoming of a lot of modern stories, and why we don't see a lot of modern classics showing up. There are plenty of modern classics. It's why I've created my Modern Masterpieces series, which I'll get back to once I actually get back to my schedule fully. There are plenty of modern masterpieces, but compared to how many stories there are being produced in the modern day, there should be way more masterpieces being created, right? Because we are standing on the shoulders of giants. I think this is one of the biggest shortcomings of stories that make them not what they used to be. We are obsessed with definition, with defining our terms, with deciding what gender Kirara is, with finding it an answer to what this monster's motivation was. We want to know things. That is not new to the modern day, obviously. That's essential to the human condition. But what is more recent is our need to eliminate ambiguity, even though ambiguity is the lifeblood of stories. Stories exist. You can probably hear my dog slurping up her water back there. Stories are built on ambiguity. They exist as means of which to explore the world around us through the use of metaphor, allegory, etc., right? It's perfectly fine that a story is built with a specific message in mind. Obviously, I don't think there will be many people to argue that MHA is a story about not being a passive bystander and not letting society be a bystander as the downtrodden are stepped all over and walked over, right? That created the antagonist of MHA. And it's not the only theme, but it's the main one. And there aren't very many different interpretations you can get from Shigaraki as a character. On the other hand, JJK has many different ways you can interpret it. You can interpret it through the allegory of cycles of hate and of vengeance, which is what I started with. You can interpret it as a commentary on ego. You can interpret it as a reflection on realities, right? And these are not mutually exclusive, but they're all different allegories you can take and run with. And that is the essence of what makes JJK so brilliant. See, this was all a trap. This is actually just a continuation of the last stream. This is the brilliance of JJK that nobody talks about. It's all the same. It's all connected because it's all JJK and it's really good. And it's in that ambiguity, right? It's in being able to talk about several different allegories of the story that makes it so worth discussing. It's so interesting. Max Godard reflecting on his comment in which Mr. Light totally folded him and showcased him as the fool he is. Absolutely not, but he did make a really good comment. Yeah, Mr. Light was the one who talked about the double slit experiment, and actually, in your defense, Max Godard also showed me that my interpretation of the double slit experiment was also wrong, because I was following the popular belief that it's about observance and not actually about interaction that causes it to change, the light change from a wave to a particle. So he took me to class too. Don't worry about it. I agree, Max. Mr. Light is one of the best commenters of the channel. Right there alongside Alex, Theo, Max Godard, Darwin Awards, some known. There's a lot of really good commenters in this channel. Mr. Light is indeed one of them. Yeah, the light really shines in Freerun. Nice one. That's why some people call it surface level. There's a layer to it that can be easily missed by some people. Shadow Monarch, that is exactly it. So many people praise JJK for being a really, like, fun shonen and being, like, really emotional, especially after the season 2, after the Shibuya incident. And there's a lot to enjoy on the surface level, so it's super tempting to just leave it at that. And a lot of people do leave it at that. But And I'm pretty sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but that's such a shame, isn't it? It's such a shame that people aren't interacting with it at this deeper level. And I'm not asking them to write paragraphs in the comments of reaction videos, but to not engage with the fact that this is a commentary on ego, that there is a real discussion about the dangers of conservatism, to maybe not deal with the existentialism of different realities for different people, armchair version of different strokes for different folks, but at least to recognize that this is a story that has several different truths and several different commentaries it wants to provide on the world. Unfortunately, people really, really want escapism today, and I can't really blame them for it, not in the slightest bit. People want escapism, and in order to, ironically, you'd think to escape you would invest yourself in another world, but in this day and age, escapism mainly means turning on something entertaining and turning off your brain. Like jujutsu, it is that give and take, you could say. So yeah, it's a shame, but there are so many layers to it that are easily missed by people, which is why I find it so valuable. And I haven't posted this as a separate video yet, but I have a compilation from one of my earlier streams about comparing Freerun and JJK, where the summary is, I think Freerun brings out better discussions on my part, which is why it's a shame to me that so many fewer people watch it than my JJK videos. Freerun creates better discussions for me because it is a show like almost tailor-made for my channel and my type of writing. But I think my JJK reactions are more valuable because anybody can watch Freerun and comment on the themes it brings up in its episodes. Far fewer people step on it, take their stage, and talk about the nuances of JJK. And that's probably why you guys have come over to me and why you enjoy my channel so much. It's because I'm doing what most people aren't doing. It's kind of a blind spot in this community of people not really engaging with JJK as deep as they should. And there are plenty of people like writing comments about it, but not many people like getting in front of a camera and being bold enough to say JJK is not just escapism. It's not just fun. There's so much more to it. Can writing like that be bad also for a series? I assume you're referring to the multiple perspectives and the multiple relations and the multiple like different ways you can view the story. And yes, there is such a thing as being too vague, right? As being too on the fence and not saying anything about anything. Like as I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm getting a little riled up here. I gotta slow down a little bit for the sake of my voice, which is still getting used to things. Still getting back in the swing of things. So writing stories can be too vague, right? JJK is not vague for the sense of vague. It's ambiguous in the way it has many different interpretations, but it also isn't afraid to say things. You can interpret it however you want, but you can't argue it doesn't say anything. Like, it's very clear that Gege has a bone to pick with conservatism, right? Not with it as a full concept, but with a lot of its shortcomings. Just look at the elders. There is no argument really to be made that Gege is fence-sitting in that regard. He clearly has a lot to say about the ego, and he is taking both sides, right? There's a difference between exploring both sides of an argument and fence-sitting. Fence-sitting is taking neither side. Exploring both sides is showing that the ego makes you stronger, and all the strongest characters in my story, due to ego, are villains, are mass murderers. Both are explored, right? And neither is determined to be right or wrong. You could argue that he's saying ego is wrong because they're antagonists, but he's not, right? Ego is very explicitly tied to strength. And if you value strength, then the antagonists are you're good guys, basically. So Gege is exploring both sides, and he does that really well. That's how he can say so much while keeping it so ambiguous. Not ambiguous necessarily, but up to interpretation. If you do fence sit and you don't say a lot, and you're ambiguous because you're trying to have people interpret it, but you're actually not saying anything and they're just stretching for it, that is when that gets bad for a series, Shadow Monarch. That's when it becomes a problem. That's when it can become a problem, I should say. Obviously, nothing is an absolute. It's all about the execution at the end of the day. JJK is sometimes even ambiguous on whether curses are cursing. Is the curse before death actually cursing, or is it just applying pressure to force someone onto something? Is there a difference even? That's another good point, Max. It's not just ambiguous on its themes, it also leaves a lot up to the imagination with its actual technicalities, right? With whether its power, whether its curses should be taken literally. Now, cursed energy, it's pretty fair to say can be taken literally, but what about Principal Yaga cursing Gakuganji? What about Nanami being afraid that he's going to lay a curse onto Yuji with his final words? Are these curses literal? Will they actually affect the world? Or are they just metaphorical? Are they just built around culture? If you ask me, the answer is it doesn't matter, right? The effect is the same. It affects the other person all the same. But it's up to interpretation. It's up to debate intentionally, because it doesn't need to be defined. Gege has no need or obligation, and in fact has every reason not to step onto an interview stage, go to a press conference and say, your final words are a physical, literal curse in JJK. The story would only suffer for it if he did that. Living Dog, you said you started out thinking JJK was about cycles of hate. Do you now believe something else? No. I believe all of them. And I understand it's a little confusing. Like I said, this isn't super prepared, so I apologize. My train of thought is going back and forth everywhere. So my stance is that I believe everything that I have said. All these different allegories, all these different perspectives, all seem to be true. And hold on, Theo is heading out. Hopefully he hasn't left already. Have a good one. I hope you enjoyed. Take care. So I believe all of them. And I think they can both be true, right? I think JJK can be an allegory for cycles of hate, and I think it can be an allegory for the ego. I think both can be true. And I think there is value in exploring both of them because both of them have different things to say about our world. And a lot of stories do, right? You can interpret it and receive it however you want. But let's stay within JJK. Let's look at Kirara. There is value in Kirara representing different things and not being explicitly defined by the author as one thing or another. If you want to see a more proper breakdown of this, check out my 3-6 reaction and in the comments, Alex's comment that I have pinned. Kirara can be whatever you want them to be. It can be a he that dresses like a girl, a femboy. They can be a she as a trans character. They can be whatever you need them to be. The point is that they are non-conforming and that conservative elders frown upon that, and that conformity frowns upon them, right? So if you are watching the story and you think Kirara should be trans because you can identify with that, Kirara can be trans. You can identify with that. That's okay. If you are a male but you are railing against masculinity and you are dressing in a feminine way, you can have Kirara be a he. You can have them identify like that. Those are both okay. Because we exist in our own realities, right? It all comes back to Mahito there. I didn't introduce him for the longest time, but now we're getting back to him. That's how these are all connected. They are both okay. They are all okay. It doesn't need a definitive answer. So going back to your comment, Living Dog, JJK doesn't have to be about cycles of hate or about the ego or about realities interacting. I don't have to choose one to believe. I can follow each of them and explore each of them because it's super interesting. That is a really great question, though. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I want to make that clear, that I'm not just saying all these things to be a fence sitter, right? I'm exploring these different angles because each of them are interesting in their own lens. And I think from a macro perspective, if you take one thing from the stream, it's that JJK and its power system is so brilliant, not because of its technicalities, but because of how versatile it is to interpretation. Whatever allegory you want to use and you want to extrapolate from JJK's power system, it can fit that mold very well. Now, it can't fit every mold, obviously. You can't say JJK is an allegory for animal abuse, or at least I don't think you can. And that's fine, right? That's the point of it not being a fence sitter. It has stances, but it is open to interpretation. So however you want to interpret it, it can go ahead and do that. And I think that is the magic and the underappreciated genius of JJK and its power system. That's this stream, not the last one. Uh-oh. I'm going on these tangents with these comments and it's getting longer and longer. Okay, let's see. On a video analysis, I saw it discuss JJK being a story about perspective, meaning it can never be wrong. Something this YouTuber called basically cheating. JJK can be really about anything you want. And I know this is a little bit of a earlier comment, so I don't know if I've kind of addressed that already to a degree I have. Oh, here's the latest comment. It can't actually be a story about animal abuse. Be strenuous to make this connection. So, yeah, I've sort of touched on this already, but that's the difference between being a fence sitter and exploring different sides of things, right? Exploring both sides. Both sidesism if you really want to, but I think that's a bit of a loaded term. JJK can't really be about anything necessarily. You can try to, you can stretch it to if you really, you can really want to, but you're going to have a lot of trouble fitting in domain expansions to the argument that higher education should be free. You're going to have, I imagine you are going to struggle explaining the difference in ideologies of Gojo and Sukuna and how that relates to why we should protect the coral reefs. You can't theoretically make it a story about anything per se. However, you can create different crafts, you can create different molds of your allegories, and if it holds up, then it is likely to hold up. How do I want to say this? You can build these different allegories depending on what you see in the story, and it is versatile enough to fit many different allegories, yet specific and tailored enough that it's not just a catch-all. So I don't agree with that as it's basically cheating. I think that the most classic stories, the most fundamental stories, just take a look at the Bible, whether you think it's true or not, it's incontrovertible that the stories in the Bible have so many different meanings, they're up to so many different interpretations, and touch on so many different fundamental truths of the human experience. And the stories that become iconic, truly iconic and classic, are the stories that can get as close as possible to capturing that truth. And that is entirely distinct from being vague or cheating by just having a general story about just following the hero's journey, right? There is a big difference between those two. It's It's nuanced, but it's important. There's reactors that explore the depths of JJK. There's one who said that JJK has a lot of characters that struggles with guilt. I started to see it because I didn't look at it that way at first. That's very true, Shadow Monarch. And I mean, especially Yuji, right? Most obviously Yuji. He deals with quite a lot of guilt. And if you haven't checked out my previous streams, I'll be releasing actually a separate video of it pretty soon, but one of them including the guilt that Yuji feels and his whole journey. It's a really great exploration of like mental health and about self-hatred. And that's currently developing, of course, because I'm still midway through season 3. JJK is a blessing / curse that it is still incredibly entertaining if you shut your brain off or just have fun with it. Yeah, there's a good and a bad to it. Like you said, a blessing and a curse. The nice thing is you don't need to be like academically ready to engage with it when you're watching it. Well, I do because I'm recording it and I have to talk about it, but if you want to, you don't have to. Unfortunately, that often becomes an excuse for people to always shut their brain off and not get as much value out of it as they could. Being very vague about an idea can be good or bad depending on what that idea is about. For example, fear is better when it's vague in its explanation. Yeah, it can be good or bad depending on what the idea is about. That's fair to say. Depending on what the idea is about, and also, most importantly, depending on the execution, right? You can have the best idea in the world, but if you execute it poorly, then it's not going to turn out well. That's just how it goes. Everything is about everything is about execution. That's why when I started watching MHA and like it didn't have the most original formula. Excuse me. My body's trying to deal with all the tea I just drank. That's why when I started watching MHA and I realized that it was basically a culmination of shonen tropes and of the best things about shonen kind of piled into a story, I wasn't turned off by it because its execution was so well. English. It was so well executed because the execution really is everything. You don't need novelty. You don't need the most philosophically exciting concepts in the world. As long as you execute what you were trying to do competently and carefully, then your story will turn out pretty good. I would wager. Concerning criticism community, there's an event I would like to mention, but it would be a little too spoilery. Well, we'll have to do that for another stream once I'm a little bit more caught up with it. To quote Teto from Hit Song Spoken For, I could be a woman, I could be a man. Look into the mirror, tell me what I am. I actually don't know that song, at least not from the lyrics or the name. But yeah, exactly. I could be whatever you want me to be. Just however you interpret it that makes sense to you and that isn't like too out of left field, it works, right? It works. You do you, boo. And some people call it cheating. I call it being accessible. I call it reaching out and affecting more people, which is the most important thing about a story, right? It's what you walk away with. Curse techniques is engraved into your brain since birth, so it could be that your way of looking at the world is totally different than another. In what way, I'm not sure, though. Yeah, it's engraved into you from birth, and it's like a part of your personality, right? Again, relating to MHA, it's like quirks, right? There's this idea that your personality and your ability, your quirk or your technique, kind of affect each other, that they alter each other, and your personality changes depending on your quirk, and that your quirk can change depending on your personality. And it's like this tug of war as you and they develop alongside each other. So naturally, since all these things are being affected, your way of looking at the world and your reality also changes, right? And it becomes different from other people because no one has the exact same experience. and no one has the same technique as you. Shikigami users are being monitored by WSPA. Yeah, but there's no proof for it. As long as you dismiss the Shikigami, then there's no proof that anything illegal is happening. JJK is a window towards the author's mind in a much stronger way than any shonen I've seen. Yes, but I would note that you should always be careful how you extrapolate a work of art into its artist. I think the most infamous example of this, especially in the modern day, is Attack on Titan. Now, there are a lot of things you hear on the internet. Some people say that Isayama has explicitly said some of these things. I haven't looked into it enough to definitively say either way, but a lot of people take some of the ideas expressed in Attack on Titan and extrapolate it onto the writer. However, as a writer, it's important to leave a disclaimer for readers that just because something is represented and explored in a story does not mean it is something I believe in, right? I think we've all heard of the idea of a devil's advocate. It's academically and intellectually dishonest to ignore perspectives you don't agree with. So with Isayama, I won't speak for him, of course, because I'm not him, but there is a lot of fascist undertones, right, within his story. If you've only seen season 1, you're probably confused as heck, but keep watching, trust me. There's a lot of fascist undertones. That doesn't necessarily mean that the writer, Isayama, has these fascist beliefs. Sometimes you need to explore ideas you don't agree with in order to give them their fair shot, in order to explain them well. Now, the fact that they are exploring these topics does say something about their writer. So with that part, I do agree with you. I do agree that you can understand a lot about the writer based on what they've written. I wouldn't say, like for JJK, I wouldn't say this rail against criticism means that Gege is against criticism. I would say you can extrapolate the commentary on criticism on conservatism, not to mean he's against conservatism, but to mean that he is somebody who is conscious and aware of the pitfalls of certain political and social ideologies, right? You can extrapolate those things and look into the author's mind in that way. Just be careful we should all be careful to not assume that because something is presented and something is explored, it means that the author agrees with that necessarily. I'm not saying JJK is fully about animal abuse. That's saying that a major part of it can be explored that way. Yeah, sometimes that's true. With interpretations, there are always going to be different interpretations you can read some way or another. And I'm not here to say your way of seeing it is wrong or that you can't explore it this way and that you can't have a part of your story exploring something. But when it comes to the versatility of JJK, again, it's really about how specific it is and about how well it fits into certain molds, right? The fact that you should not create a mold, then see if JJK fits into it. You should observe JJK and then form a mold around it. That's the best way to build these allegories and to see how open to interpretation it is. And I think that's a big thing I should also touch on. I'll include this in the separate VOD about interpretations from this stream. One important thing that separates fence sitters from those who explore multiple different aspects of something, one thing that separates a story that you can criticize for being vague for vagueness sake as a sort of cheat code to be relatable versus something like JJK that has many different interpretations. An important distinction between these two is that the latter, JJK, a story that has different interpretations, is designed in a way that you can take different interpretations if you form the mold around what you've experienced. So you watch or read JJK, and then you form a mold of an allegory. And through that process of molding, different people will take different allegories from it. On the contrary, the former, the one where it's just open to everybody and it's just designed in a way to be, publicly consumed and that anyone can interpret it however they want, they're fence sitters, that story thrives on an audience's ability to walk into the story not having read it, with a mold of their own, and then watching as this fluid story fits their mold that they've created. Does that make sense? The difference is whether you walk in with a mold and the story is so fluid and undefined that you can make it fit your predetermined mold, or a story that is open to interpretation that you create your mold around the story. And however you build your mold is going to be different from other people because you have different experiences. Again, with Kirara, they are not vague for the sake of just being vague's sake. They're not vague for fence sitting, so they don't offend anybody. They are vague because when you read the story and you experience Kirara, you interpret them in a way that fits your worldview, and you create a unique mold based on what you've watched that is unique to you. And that's what I mean when I say JJK is so open to interpretation and why it's so brilliant for it. And what makes a story brilliant for being open to interpretation. It's how many different molds you can create after experiencing it, not prior to it. If you create a mold prior to it and it fits it, then that's just a fluid story that completely lacks definition, which is also bad, right? Given your understanding of the series, would you make any predictions about events or interactions you think will happen? I hate to disappoint you, Alex, but no. I'm not here to make predictions. I'm not here to posit about the future. I'm a lot more interested in analyzing what I've seen rather than predicting the future. If you remember one of my earlier streams, that's why I called out SOS Bros, Semblance of Sanity, another reaction YouTuber that's way bigger than me, obviously. Oh, I think they're so fun, and what makes them so distinct is that they have great predictions, and they are really great at creating like potentials in the future for stories. I am not that kind of person, so I will not be the best person. I will not create very interesting like potential future routes. Some known as predicting every possible spoiler I could give for JJK. Yeah, you're just looking at the transcript. You're just cheating. That's not fair. You also predict that Gege will write the idle manga concept they have and somehow make it JJK. Oshi no Kaizen. That would be awesome. The exact same initials as Oshi no Ko, which would not be confusing at all. Oh, and you could have it be about Takada-chan with Toto a recurring character. Alex, I like the way you think. You and Sumknown got to get together sometime. Pin Gege down and force him to pump out that manga. I think that would be awesome. Honestly, judging by his interviews and his way of answering questions, JJK, although initially written without much passion, quote, since Gege wasn't convinced if he should continue the story, reflects a lot of him in the story, especially in the most prominent characters. Interesting. So he does put a lot of himself into the story, which makes sense. Despite what I said about how you shouldn't take a writer putting something in a story to reflect that writer's beliefs, I don't want that to say that writers don't put themselves into their story, right? Most good writers define their stories and create their stories and characters based on their own experiences, right? Because you can speak most on your experiences. And like you said, especially the most prominent characters, it makes sense that they reflect a lot of the person. There you can extrapolate a lot more on the actual author. I would say what I would say you need to be more cautious about is, again, with topics like whether he's conservative or liberal, which could be very answerable if he's on like interviews he has, but should not be answerable based on his story. You should not determine that he is anti-conservative based on him writing JJK. You should not determine that he is anti-ego based on JJK, right? He is exploring these themes and giving them a fair exploration. That doesn't necessarily mean he believes it. Could he still believe it? Yes, but the whole point is don't get it from their story. Don't take that as a assumption to be true. There's this topic of spoken for. Never heard this before. A Vocaloid song. A whole bunch of comments on it, so I feel like I should at least bring it up here. Explores the themes of too much popularity through Tetos. Gained a lot of motion as a Vocaloid recently. I'm not a big Vocaloid person myself. The song's static is about being forgotten, using Hatsune Miku instead. Mirrors. Fun connection between two songs is a meta-narrative. Interesting. Gege was literally in season 3, episode 5. Shadow Monarch. Was he now? Does he actually present himself as a fun little Easter egg in episode 5? That's awesome. I would love to see that. You gotta let me know when it is, and I'll go back and take a look at that. That's super fun. That's super fun. It's always great when like people insert themselves into stories, not as self-inserts, but just as little Easter eggs, right? Like one of my favorite examples is Star Wars. I forget what exactly it is, but I believe it was the original like director or the person who was largely behind the first Star Wars movie presenting having a like little guest appearance as a stormtrooper, I believe it was, in like episode 5 or 6. And when they shoot him, he does his own impression of the Wilhelm scream as we know it as. And these little homages and these little not homages, but yeah, these little moments where they kind of show into themselves in the story. And if you know, you know, those are always super fun and super cute. And it's great of the producers to play along and include that. God, some known making me doubt my own reality. Bold of you to assume Alex and me are different people. Everyone you see in chat too, for that matter. All written by a single person. I'll do you one better. What if I'm just AI? What if I was just AI written by the you of the future, who's presenting this into the past in order to guide you of the present? What if I'm a time-traveling AI, here just to mess with you? Of course I'm not. Of course not. And then Alex says the exact same thing. As some known. Very nice. Okay, maybe you are actually the same person. I knew there couldn't be more than one person interested in JJK thematically. They had to be the same single person. Oh yeah, someone bring out the one-eyed cat. Oh, one-eyed cat mask, yeah. I was thinking about the one-eyed cat back in the second opening of season 1, where he was presented. Oh, somewhere in the background crowd during the Panda versus Yuji fight. Okay, that's a great place to insert the author. That's super fun. Super cute. This entire chat is just me ping-pong thoughts in my brain. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right? You could argue that's all society is. It's just society ping-ponging different thoughts in their head. That's all philosophy is. Ooh, Alex just sent it in chat. The screenshot. Oh, the one-eyed cat mask. Okay, I see it. That's fun. That's cute. That's very cute. I love it. As someone interested in writing, I see myself in virtually every character somehow. Yeah, Max Godard. Yeah, and you should. That's good. That takes a level of self-awareness that a lot of people and a lot of storytellers don't really have. And once you have it, it's hard to unsee it. But it's important too, because you don't want to make it too obvious, right? And you don't really want to change it. It's natural that all of your characters, to a degree, will reflect some part of you, especially the more important ones. Because, like I said, it's obvious, but it still deserves, it's worth mentioning. We write based on experience, right? And a lot of times as writers, our experience is what other stories we've experienced. That's how somebody who never leaves their mother's basement can pump out a genre-defining novel. you don't have to necessarily have these experiences yourself. Even through assimilating other stories, you gain experience, and those become your experience for writing your story. That being said, please do go outside. The more experiences you have yourself, that will enhance your writing even more. But we write based on experience, so it's natural that the more that we explore ourselves and the more we put ourselves into a character, the deeper that character will be, right? If I were to, here, I'm going to go from the most vague possible way to explain this. If I were to write a female character, heaven forbid I write a female character into my story, fundamentally, that character will be less believable, less realistic than my male characters. Right? I've never been female. I'm going to say that right now. I am no Kirara. I have never been female. I have presented male my whole life, and I may not be the perfect image of masculinity, but I am a male. I have never had a female experience. So fundamentally, my depiction of female characters will be less believable, less well-developed and less realistic than my male characters, because I can put a little bit less of myself into my female characters. And really quickly before I continue on that, some known, I'm referring to the second ED, or the second opening of season 1. So Vivid Vice. In the first opening scenes, you see a cat with the one eye. That's the reference I was talking about. Did I say ED? I meant opening. The second OP. Could be a gay and slip. gay and slip. Oh my god. But yeah, I hope that makes sense, Max Godard. The more you put yourself into your characters, the more believable they'll be, because they're based on our experiences. If, going less vague than the female characters, if I were to write a character that is a fascist, let's say, just shooting something out in the dark, I can write a deep character. I can write a well-explored character of things I don't necessarily believe, or so he claims. But that doesn't mean that I can write a very believable character based on like what I've learned about fascism, and like I've watched movies about fascists. But since I am not a fascist myself, or so he claims, I will fundamentally not write that character as believably as, heaven forbid, an actual fascist were to write that character. And that's just that's just part of the game, right? From writer to writer, we need to decide how much of ourselves we put into each of the characters to make them both distinct, yet filled with enough of our experiences that they present as believable because they are connected to our experience. It's true that you can fill in the rest of the blanks with experiences of you watching shows about fascists per se, or heaven forbid you talking to a woman, but we can start to fill in those blanks. But we want to put a certain amount of ourselves into each of our characters so that they are believable, so that they are good characters. And that's why I'm not surprised when I hear someone say that through interviews, Gege admitted that a lot of him is in the most prominent characters, because the more prominent the character is, the more in-depth they need to be, the more you need to explore them. So they should have more of you in it, so you can explore it better. Now, in a show like JJK, that matters a little bit less than a lot of other stories, like in Frieren. In Frieren, it's a lot more important to have a well-developed character. It's a lot more important to have that in Frieren than JJK, because JJK is, I've said numerous times in the stream, a story that is built to enhance its themes, whereas Frieren is a story with themes that enhance it. Well, actually, that one's debatable. You could argue that Frieren also is a story that enhances its themes, but let's go with MHA. Its themes enhance its characters and its story, whereas JJK enhances its themes through its story. So its characters need to be a little bit less realized, and they don't need to be as well explored and as Like, they don't need as much screen time because they are there for a purpose. And that's why this show is moves at such a breakneck pace, right? And why we don't get random filler arcs of a character going out and learning that their long lost father is actually alive or sent a secret message to them. We're not as worried about these characters. Gege is not as worried about these characters as he is worried about what these characters bring to the table, what they represent in his story. Because everything in JJK should be in service to the story, in service to the themes, not the story. Themes and the story, but you know what I mean. And I think there's goods and bad sides to it. There's positives and negatives to having such a well-refined story that is like, it builds in service to your themes. On the bright side, your story moves incredibly fast, and I think we can all talk about how incredibly efficient and fast-paced JJK is. Some known. A name is probably not a spoiler. I can almost guarantee you I will not remember it. Far from, not even at the end of the stream, but 5 minutes from now. So if you really want to drop it, you can go ahead, as long as it's not like Hikamari Gojo. Like, that's obviously a spoiler. Like, there's another Gojo in the story. If it's like just a random name like Hikari, or like Sam, drop it all you want. And if Alex deems it a spoiler, then he can knock it out. That's why I'm glad Alex is here. We always have at least one of our mods here. I may have to add some new mods too as well, just so Alex doesn't feel pressured to always be on these streams. But yeah, go ahead, drop things. If it looks like a spoiler, Alex will get rid of it. And yeah, go ahead. I don't want you to hold yourself back because you're afraid of spoilers per se. And that's what moderators are for. But regarding JJK, if you've watched my early reactions to season 1 and I think a lot of season 2, one of my biggest criticisms about JJK, and one of the things I disliked the least about it, I would say it was less of a criticism, more of something that just didn't really mesh with me very well, is how fast it moved. It moved a little bit too fast for my liking. I really like stories that are clearly unrefined, that are a little bit messy, that linger maybe a little bit too long on a scene, or that characters go off on a tangent that isn't directly related to the theme of the story. Common writing advice in the modern day is that you need to cut all the fat out of your story. But I don't think cutting out all the fat is necessarily a good thing. I recently saw, and here's my train of thoughts going everywhere, I recently saw a post of a poll that was taken about a before and after of a man who like decided to get shredded, and he was fit beforehand, but he like lost all of his belly fat. And the poster asked women which they found more attractive. And well, they asked men and women which they thought were more attractive. The men chose the shredded guy, right? Because he's incredibly fit. He looked like a bodybuilder. But the women, most of the women actually found the before picture to be more attractive, where he's got a little bit of a dad bod, even though he's clearly very fit. And the reason I bring that up is because trimming the fat is good. Trimming all the fat is problematic. Has a lot of things that are problematic about it, because it implies a single-minded devotion to the form of obsession. With fitness, it implies that not only would you starve to death if food were to become scarce, but it implies that you center your life around fitness, because I'm, again, probably preaching to the choir. It's really hard to be shredded. It takes a lot of effort. You really have to design your life around your fitness if you are going to have that six-pack and those bulging muscles. Most people don't do that. Most people try a little bit, have like a goal, but don't actually try to accomplish it because it's unreasonable. And if you do accomplish it, it says a lot about you. And that's what a lot of the women in the poll explained. They found the person with a tiny bit of a dad bod, a little bit of fat, more attractive than the shredded person, because the explicit implication is that the person who has a little bit of fat doesn't center their life around fitness. They have other things. They like to eat food. They don't spend every minute thinking about how they can burn more calories like I do. I'm not shredded, by the way. They aren't as narrow-minded on their fitness. They want to be healthy, but they live a life. The shredded person may also live a life, but their life is significantly limited by how it affects their body and how much they're thinking about their body. So yes, objectively, trimming the fat makes your story look better. But it says a lot about the story, and it loses a lot of its flavor. And now I'm getting into cannibalism. Let's step away from the metaphors for a second. Trimming the fat loses a lot of personality. That's more immediately relatable between the two, right? If you have a lot less of a life because you're focusing on your health, your fitness over all else, you build your life around your health, you have a lot less room for personality versus somebody who likes fitness, engages with it, but has a lot of other things to do. They have more opportunities to develop more personality. Now let's look at stories. Look at something like JJK. And yes, I know before I said this wasn't really a criticism, it was more of a preference, but you know what? I'm gonna stop being a fence sitter. This is actually a criticism of JJK. It's too trim. It's too shredded. JJK is too shredded for me. I've said it, okay? I admit it. It's too shredded. JJK removed all of the fat from its story. And it lost a lot of personality. Yes, Living Dog, we're actually at the bottom. We're actually in the moment right now. I'm caught up with the stream at the moment. But give me like 5 more minutes and I will be a whole layer behind, because I'm going to talk about this fitness and about stories and about JJK and about one of the strongest and I think most lasting critiques I have about JJK, that now I'm getting off the fence and I'm taking a stand. It is a criticism of JJK. It has trimmed too much fat. It has lost a lot of personality. I think JJK would benefit a lot more from not being concerned that every single second is in service of its story and its themes. I think the story would benefit a lot from things that are from tangents. And to illustrate this, one of my favorite scenes from season 2. In fact, I'll narrow it down so it's even crazier of a statement. You can quote me on this. One of my favorite scenes from the Shibuya incident arc is a flashback where Megumi, Yuji, and Nobara stain one of Gojo's shirts. And then he walks in and they stuff it in their chest and their shirt. I'm going to give Alex a second to write a paragraph as to how that fills into the thematics of the story, because I'm sure he can. But realistically, that scene could be cut from the story and it wouldn't really lose anything. What it did is it helped us fall further in love with this trio. Because if a memory serves, that was right before Nobara dies. It might have been before Gojo was sealed. But it's not necessary, and yet it's so important. It's like the 1% of fat that JJK still has in it. These little scenes that are extra, if that weren't a flashback, but if that were happening just in the moment a few episodes ago, that would have enhanced it so much. It's these little moments that aren't necessary, that don't have any immediate relevance, any immediate thematic through line, that makes us feel the human nature of these characters, right? That's one of the things that makes me love MHA so much. It's refined, it's trim, it's got a body fat percentage of under 20%. but it's still in the double digits because it has a lot of interactions with Class A where they're just shooting the shit and they're just interacting with each other and bouncing off each other and building character. And it's really fun because you're a part of this class, right? You're a part of this class. You are a part of it as they go through different things, and they leave plenty of time to digest big things that have happened that Horikoshi technically could have cut out. He could have trimmed that fat and MHA wouldn't have lost too much thematically or like story-wise. But it would have lost a lot of heart. And I think JJK is missing a lot of heart because it trimmed too much fat. Now, before the JJK fanboys tune out because I'm criticizing JJK too much, I can also wrap this around to be a strength. This is also a strength I should recognize, because JJK is miraculous. I still can't believe how efficient it is and how well it works. There's your praise. Now back to the criticism. It just could be better. Exactly, some known. JJK would not survive in Sweden because it lacks the fat. That's important for a lot of things. Yeah, it's literally important. That's why it's so hard to burn. That's why we struggle so much with it. It's hard to burn because it's important, right? We see it as a bad because our perception of what is good, what makes a story good, what makes our health good is being trim, being lean. That's what's attractive, right? To a story and to a human being. And in villainizing fat, whether in a story or a body, we forget how important it is. We forget that when food gets low, when we are running a marathon, that fat becomes useful. Okay, now I'm in the metaphor mind, so you guys are gonna have to stick with me here. A marathon, right? It's a marathon. Watching a long-running story is a marathon. When you are running a marathon, literally, your body starts drawing upon fat when it runs out of like its carbs and sugars and its easily accessible storages. It taps into its fat to gain energy. In the metaphor, when you are watching a longer story and your attention starts to stray, the story starts, or you start reaching into your fat reserves of the story. You start reaching into the metaphor is getting weird again because you're reaching into somebody else's body and taking their fat. Think of it like you're consuming a story, right? And when you consume like MHA, it's got a lot of fat, so it builds up a lot of fat with you. And then as you go on the marathon of the story, you get tired because you are running a marathon. So you start burning the fat that you consumed with that story in order to keep up the pace in the story. With JJK, it risks exhaustion because it did not give you very much fat that your body can now draw on. Now, JJK is also a fairly short story, so there isn't too much of a marathon, but it runs that risk, and that is a fair criticism to make of it. He says about his own criticism. Yeah, retaining functional strength and keeping fat levels low enough to avoid health problems. That's a good thing to focus on. I go a little bit further. I've got a bit of a complex about my gut and about how healthy it is, but that's what's really most important. Or as Max Godard says it, just say it, JJK needs more filler. Rah! Or I guess I'm a Marine, so I should say, ooh, yeah, JJK needs more filler. And now here we are, Living Dog. Where in chat are we? Now we're at the top of the chat, not the bottom anymore. I've done it. But JJK is too shredded. I hate that it's too trim. It's off-putting, right? Living Dog? Fillers as good as long as they help the story and aren't excessive. Alex. Hold that thought. I'll decide once I read these future comments if I want to go on a tangent about that or not. Jujutsu Strolls, the Juju sample were an essential addition to JJK. Yes, some known. I adored those. I had so much fun watching those in season 1. And while I appreciate why they got rid of it, especially as the story got more serious, it also did lose some heart because of that. And okay, Living Dog's mentioning it too. I'll definitely have to talk about filler in a second. Filler isn't entirely bad, but story isn't. I feel like is a good distinction. There's no absolutes, but yeah, I get what you're saying. Alex, I would say that filler is a store. A filler. I would say that filler is a store. It's like a filled donut. Added precisely, it gives a good flavor, but too much of it becomes a mess. Without it, it's still good, but not the best. Yuji is a commentary about how the story of JJK is hyperthyroidism. Now that is an allegory we can run with. That's not really an allegory, though. That's just an analogy. It is eating good, but metabolize the story too fast, making it thin. Shadow Monarch also had this problem with JJK, but this happens a lot, where it moves on too quick from a character's death. Yeah, the story is so efficient to the point where it can even give you whiplash, like you said, which is unfortunate, but it's kind of inherent to its breakneck pace. JJK needs to be able to shred my cheese. I require it for my knuckebrod. I still need to try that. That sounds delicious. And it's got shredded cheese in it. Oh, man. Alex commenting on moving on from death. I think that's because the author takes death in a non-ceremonial way, as in the case in real life with someone's premature death. That's interesting. That's something I'll have to sit on a little bit more to think about how it wraps back around to a proper death. But that is a really good point. I appreciate you bringing that up. Now, we're at 2:43. I'm not going to end the stream yet because I've still got a lot of energy. You can all filter out if you want. I'm going to take one more bathroom break because I've emptied out my tea. I will be right back. And when I'm back, I'm going to go on my talk about filler. And I'm going to step on my pedestal and I'm going to have a lot to say because I have a lot to say about filler. So stay tuned, folks. Someone, we both still got a lot left in the tank. Well, I've got a little less in the tank now, thankfully. God, how do you know that you're an experienced streamer without saying you're an experienced streamer? 2 bathroom breaks in the span of 3 hours? Ugh, talk about amateur. Amateur hour over here. While you're taking a bathroom break, I'm going to take a Swedish medicine break. Swedish medicine, just like medicine, but Swedish, whatever that means. Interpret that how you will. Well, I think you just missed it, unless you just came back from that. But you know what? That's a good point. I came back just to head out again. I'm going to grab some water just so I have enough voice in my own tank. Because filler is something I definitely got to talk about here. And then we'll probably close out the stream. We'll be right back. feel like I should put something else up here other than Mojito. Let me see if I got something else I can put here. Let's see. You know what? I know exactly what picture to put up here. I think you guys might recognize this one. That's perfect for our incoming talk about filler. That's perfect. Uh-oh. 3:54. The sun shouldn't be setting already. I might grab my light, or I might not. By the way, in case you guys noticed, you may or may not have noticed, I changed my stream thing a little bit. I think it's a little weird to have that be the stream and like me have a little tiny picture in there. So I changed it while keeping that picture part of the new thumbnail. Let me know what you guys think about the live thumbnail. I was trying to consider what to do there because obviously I can't just have a picture like I do from my actual thumbnails. In case you didn't know, I actually take my thumbnails from the episode. I don't create them for the thumbnail. It's so fun to surf through it, but since I haven't done the stream yet, obviously I can't do that. And I like the idea of my thumbnails for all my live streams being the same thing, just so you can identify the live stream immediately. So let me know what you think of my new thumbnail for live streams. I was wondering, I was trying to find a good place to use that picture, especially with the background removed, and I think I found the perfect place for it. It's just recognizable enough to be me. Ooh, Sumknown's also grabbing some knuckle blood. I apologize for how badly I'm butchering that word. Shadow Monarch also bringing up Nanami getting burned quickly, and then it's just immediately moved on. Yeah, it's very fast. Oh, Max Guard brings out Discord as one of the human beings who less utilize Discord to hang out. And Alex doesn't use it either. I use Discord a little bit, mainly for the same thing that you're presenting here, where like we could have a group Discord. I've considered that, and I definitely want to have that eventually. I realize I don't really have a butt, I just haven't explored it very much, but I wouldn't mind starting like a Discord for this community. I guess you guys could decide whether it would be a Patreon Discord or whether it would be just for YouTube. Maybe I could have it on Patreon, but it could be a free Discord, just so we don't get random people coming here like from my YouTube channel, or just random trolls, people who actually go to Patreon, and I want it to be a free access, but I want it to actually be people who are willing to click on a link. Yes, Alex, I'm going to force you to progress. You don't have to Discord if you don't want to. I'm just going to say that if you guys ever want to just shoot the shit or just say whatever, or just comment on like my reactions, that could be a great place as like kind of our community board, a place where we can just talk about my channel or just talk about random things, like a stream that's always ongoing. And I could, I guess, make a Discord server. I'm certainly not opposed to it. Server hosting is free somehow. Interesting. They probably pulled it off because they get income from so many other places and they're not insanely greedy yet. That's probably why. Though they are getting a little bit 1985-ish. 85? Oh my god, I'm showing my butt right now. They're getting a little bit dystopian with requiring people for like age verification, all that weird stuff. But at least they're not greedy, and it looks like with their servers, that's great. 1984. Thank you, Alex. Living Dog is crying. I know, I'm a fake writer. I got the year wrong. I'm just gonna go ahead and blame my ADHD. I swear it's that fault. I swear I know my dates. Don't take away my history degree, please. It's very important. But yeah, I probably will make a Discord at some point, and I'll make it free, but I'll probably put it on my Patreon so that people actually go over to it to find it, so they don't just hop over from YouTube. So it's actually like is people who are engaged with this community. But again, it will be free because obviously you can join Patreon for free and you can join groups for free. So that's probably what I'll do when I get around to it. So that'll happen when it happens. Okay. There's one last big thing I probably want to talk about, assuming I don't go on another tangent to these comments before we end off the stream. Let's talk about filler. Now, there are comments in here about filler, and I'm not going to be directly responding to them because I'm going to be defining my terms and like what I consider filler. That could very well be different from how you define filler. So if I define my terms and my filler is different from yours, obviously, if I say like, this is what filler is and filler is bad, but you say this is what filler is and filler is good, we are not necessarily disagreeing, right? We just have different definitions. If my definition of a cat is a furry creature, then I can say a dog is a cat. If your definition of a cat is something that has a tail, then a raccoon can be a cat. Both of our truths are equally valid. They are not necessarily contradicting each other. So this isn't a direct response to you guys' filler, but I'm going to just define my term first of all. To me, filler is exactly what it's named after. It is filler. It is something that is explicitly added to pad runtime. It is specifically something that is not necessary to the story and that does not inherently that is inherently essential to the story, right? Now, generally, this means it is something new to the adaptation, especially when we go into an anime context. Filler is generally anime original content, AOC. That doesn't have to be true. Manga can have filler too. If you read some of the big stories of manga and like you're familiar with the horrors of Shonen Jump, you'll know that a lot of manga has filler. So it's not necessarily adaptation focused, but I often add that as a little asterisk to what filler is. It's inherently, like literally by the nature of it, not unnecessary to the story because it is filler, and it exists to pad out the runtime or the read time, whatever. It pads out its source, right? That is what filler is according to literally its word, filler. So, is filler good? Can filler be good? Yes. Allow me to sit on my fence real quick and squat down real low. Sort of. Filler can be good, but I would say filler is generally not good. So let's go back to that example of Yuji, Nobata, and Megumi, spilling the stain on Gojo's shirt. That scene is not necessary to the story, but it is not filler because it does not exist to pad anything out. And Alex, feel free to, or any of you feel free to prove me wrong if there's literally evidence from like an interview that they included that scene because the episode wasn't long enough. But as I see it now, it is not filler because it was not included to pad out the runtime. It was included to deepen our bond with these characters, right? I feel like it can only be truly bad if made by me. God. But filler generally, I would say, is bad. There can be good filler, but filler as a concept is bad. It is a necessary evil, you could say, due to the horrible nature that a lot of manga writers work under, and especially anime adapters. But filler is bad in the sense that it is there to fill up space. Filler is, I should say, different from fat. I have spent a lot of time in this stream talking about fat and praising fat and not fat shaming and body positivity. No, not that. Definitely not that. I have my own rant I can go on about body positivity, but that's neither here nor there. Filler is not fat. Fat is you insert a scene in between two arcs to build out your characters' relations, have them reflect on the world, and get closer to them. Filler is where your characters go out to the beach and you don't really learn anything new about the characters, and it doesn't really have much to offer. Now, again, there are no absolutes, right? I am not saying all filler is bad. You can have that beach episode and have it be genuinely good. If you've watched MHA, you've probably seen the filler episode that is the filler recap episode of, I believe, every season up until season 6. And the vast majority of those filler episodes are really good because they were created really well and offer a lot of character interactions, a lot of value. There is valuable filler. I should have that disclaimer out big. That doesn't mean I like filler. Those are the exceptions that prove the rule, if you would. I wish we lived in a world where filler was not necessary, where authors were not forced to pump out a certain amount of chapters for their weekly Jump magazine, and they have to add filler. I wish that anime producers were not, and higher-ups were not so on the asses of storyboarders that they have to have filler. I wish we didn't have that world, but we kind of just do, and we gotta deal with it. So I grumble, accept filler, and hope it's good. But on its own, I don't like it. It can be done well, but I generally don't like it. I much prefer Fat, where you have characters interact and something that technically could be removed from the story, and the story would be, this is fine. That's like Fat, right? And that's all the stuff that JJK trimmed out, most of the stuff. That is good. That is not filler. That is Fat. That is important for us to get to know and love these characters. So yeah, that's kind of my commentary on Alex's comment. And I know I just said this wouldn't be like a specific, like attacking your specific comment, but according to my definition, which may change your response, but for the sake of argument, I'm going to read your comment in the perspective of my definition of filler. I would say it's not quite like a filled donut. I would say that's more Fat. Added precisely gives a good flavor, but too much becomes a mess. That is, I would define that as Fat, not filler. But that's just me being nuanced, obviously. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that's how I would make that delineation, and that's why I would say that filler, generally, no, I don't like it. It can be done well, but that's something that should not have happened in the first place. It should have been Fat instead. Fully acceptable definition. Awesome. And now we get to go out into the world and pretend that that definition is accepted and understood by everyone and argue accordingly. That's the worst thing, right? And that's the problem with so many internet arguments and just even real life arguments. We argue past each other because we don't define our terms. If every debate started with each side defining their terms and then not rejecting the other person's definition of the other person's terms, debates might actually go somewhere, but they would be less entertaining, so that wouldn't be acceptable, would it? So filler is like a tumor. In a way, I suppose. I would say filler is like sugar. It's something you can do without. It's something that can theoretically be good, like if you're running a sprint, but it is something that is inherently not sugar, I'll say alcohol. Sugar is like alcohol. It is something that is fundamentally fundamentally it's bad, right? Alcohol is bad. It's literally poison. That's not up to interpretation. Alcohol is literally poison. However, just because that thing is fundamentally bad doesn't mean people can't use it in ways that are begrudgingly positive. And the fire is coming from inside the house, by the way. I historically have live my life having one drink every night, having like a glass of wine to wind down from the day. And that's what I mean by having something that is fundamentally bad, but using it in a way that is good, where you can begrudgingly accept that it exists for a good purpose. You can have a good filler episode in the same way that you can legitimately have a glass of wine to de-stress. Are there alternatives to that glass of wine to de-stress? Probably. Are there alternatives to having a filler episode? Probably. Both can be true, right? I can dislike filler and enjoy a good filler. I can recognize alcohol as poison and occasionally use alcohol to de-stress myself. It's all about not defining these absolutes and not being willing to have your definition be malleable, right? It's all about malleability here, which is painfully hard to have these days. Real fillers, the Nobara backstory totally should have been removed. Totally not, because I cried. Oh man, what was that girl's name? Yuki? When she started crying like her big old blobs of tears as Nobara was being taken away on the train. Oh, that hit me way harder than it had any right to. I cried over Yuji hitting the cursed corpse each time he did it. Such a potent message against animal abuse. And next thing you know, next episode, Sumknown's gonna have a fully prepared multi-paragraph thesis on how JJK is actually about animal abuse. I can't wait to read that. No, Alex, I have not finished the Demon Slayer story. I'm watching it as the anime comes out because the anime adaptation is so phenomenal, and I've not read the manga, but I've seen like panels and pages. They've done it in such a good way. I feel like it would be a genuine disservice to myself to read the manga rather than experience it the first time through the story, through the anime. Even if the anime is painstakingly slow in how it's getting through this final arc and releasing these movies, it's doing it well. So it's a disservice to not do that. JJK, I think I generally completely agree. Love that, Max Godard. 30% of the time works 100% of the time. But I've seen pretty good stuff that would kind of enter that definition. I assume you're talking about trimming the fat. And yeah, there are some things that do it well. JJK does it well. But I think having more fat means that you have more heart. Now, having too much Freudian slip, having too much fat means having too much heart, and your heart arteries get clogged, and suddenly you have to go to the emergency room. But having fat gives you heart, and I think that's good. I wish my mother understand alcohol and smoking is bad. Uh-oh. Methinks Max Godard's story is going to have some... I shouldn't say that, that's mean. Max, before I make the joke I was about to make, please indicate on a scale of 1 to 10 how resilient you are to potentially offensive jokes. In the meantime, you'd never give alcohol to your pets or kids, yet people give alcohol to themselves. Of course, everything is fine in moderation. That's another great thing. That's another great point, and a whole other thing to go into, a whole other tangent to go on about how we apply different standards to ourselves as opposed to other people. It's a really interesting concept and leads to a lot of like self-hate, right? Like you love other people, but you don't love yourself. And there's all those other things. I was going to sign off in a little bit. If you want me to keep going on tangents, I can, but I feel like you guys probably have other places to be, so I might save that for another stream. I forgot who said it, but there's a good quote in The Dose Makes the Poison. And yeah, Sumknown credited Paracelsus. Exactly, yeah, the dose makes the poison. Everything in moderation. Would I ever consider non-anime reactions? Living Dog, yes, I would. I am less partial to them because I love the art of anime. And I don't mean like the art style, I mean the production of it. I love how the music, the storyboarding, the character designing, even the manga sometimes, the directing, all these different things come together in a way that very few Western productions can match. And watching most Western productions, they really don't match up to anime, but not in the way that most people think. It's not about the excessive emotion of anime. It's not about the screaming, and it's not even about the Japanese. But I think Alex and I can both agree that that's a big part of it. But there's just something that a lot of Western anime don't really have that doesn't make it worse, but makes it less interesting to watch from the perspective of my channel. However, I am very, very open to watching non-anime watching non-anime videos and doing reactions on them. So I will occasionally have them on their polls. I almost put Arcane on my latest poll, my JJK replacement poll for the Modern Masterpiece. I took it off though because I decided to limit that poll to like only 5 shows. But it'll probably be on one of the future polls because I hear it's really, really good. So that's a long-winded way, Ada Regagan special. It's a long-winded way of saying that, yes, I'm open to non-anime reactions. I could have just said that. You could have just said that. The stream would have been 10 minutes long. In that case, what do you think of the filler in season 4 from Alex? I assume you're talking about JJK still, because I think the stream is still about JJK. Or no, not JJK, sorry. It's not in season 4 yet. Oh god, I'm not beating the time traveler allegations, am I? I assume you're talking about Demon Slayer. I didn't like season 4. I'm just gonna, well, no, sorry, not season 4, that was season 3. Hashira training arc was really, really good. And I heard that like the vast majority of it was filler, was like added to basically pad the runtime, but it wasn't really added to pad the runtime, right? I mean, you could argue it was, and maybe they said it was, but it was to really build out this arc and really build it out and flesh it out, because the Hashira training arc is really, really short, right? It's really short. So I loved the Hashira training arc. It's actually one of my favorite arcs in Demon Slayer because of how much it focuses on characters and how much it matters. So I would say a lot of that is fat, and not even just fat. It's anime original, but it's not filler. And I think that's, pointing out season 4 of Demon Slayer is a great way to point out a distinction between filler and anime original, how those things aren't necessarily the same thing and are often not the same thing, right? Someone's working as animal abuse allegory. Have fun with that. Max Godard, resilient on the outside where it matters. Okay, so I assume you're good with taking hits, but I forgot what I was going to say, so I guess you're spared this time. Currently working on home office because I'm taking care of my mother. So I would rather be here for the rest of the day. Well, I hope I'm not like taking you away from your mother. I hope you mean you're watching this like instead of being productive, but you're still taking care of your mother. In which case, it looks like you, Living Dogs Unknown, you all really like me being here. So I guess I'll keep going on tangents. I mean, I guess if you ever want to leave, you're always free to leave whenever you want. But I guess while I've got energy and while there's sun in the sky, we'll just keep going. More content for me. And for you. We all have time for paragraphs. Ooh, I can spell the money. I watched Arcane and a lot of discussion on it. I have a lot of paragraphs for it. There are a few select shows and series where I truly possess the ability to mass produce paragraphs. Well, I'm going to say you already have a point there that I don't have right now because I'm not a paragraph guy. I love writing essays, but I'm not a comment paragrapher. When I do write comments, I write paragraphs, but I'm not much of a commenter. YouTube is kind of perfect for me, something I never really thought about. But I much prefer saying things out loud to writing them if I'm like dissecting an anime and exploring my own thoughts. If I'm like writing a story, I'll probably prefer to write it down. But when it comes to something like this, for some reason when I'm writing it, I get too stressed about wording it exactly right. Whereas when I'm talking, I know I'm going to get it wrong. So I guess the stress is less there. JJK, Hoseki no Kuni, Dorehidoro, and Ultra Kill. I only know Ultra Kill from when you mentioned it in your comment. I've never heard of JJK before. Dorehidoro, I've seen the name and I think I've seen the like cover of it, but I don't really know anything about it. And Hoseki no Kuni, that is something I also want to put on my polls eventually. Probably in my Hinwitties, my How Have I Not Watched This Yet, for Land of Lustrous, because it does look like a really good and interesting show that I would love to watch at some point. So it's definitely going to go on a poll sometime in the future. That and like Violet Evergarden are two of the present shows I'm looking forward to seeing what people gauge people's reactions on. Yeah, Max Godard. I know you can relate to trying to get out your ideas and knowing that it's not going to be the same. You're not going to be able to put it to page or to word quite as well as it is in your head. Ultra Kill has such a dedicated community of animators that the meme of Ultra Kill anime when is somewhat realistic, but would be CGI. Interesting. Isn't it like a video game or something? I think it is, but I mentioned that comment out loud actually to my brother, my older brother, and I think he mentioned it. He's like, isn't that like this game that came out? And I was saying, I heard of it before, but I don't actually know what it is. So I'm just going to nod and say yes. Yes. Okay, cool. Max Godard is multitasking, working while commenting, currently on the repetitive part of editing. I am sorry to hear that. Some people really enjoy editing. I do not. It's why I haven't posted a second video essay yet. By the way, if you haven't seen my first video essay, go ahead and check it out. It's on Demon Slayer, but you don't need to have watched Demon Slayer before. I give a pretty good rundown of it. So check that out if you haven't already. I'm really proud of it. And I'm a little sad it didn't do super well, but it was also really early in my channel. So maybe I should like repost it and see if it does any better. But it's also like copyrighted to hell, so it's probably not being shown to a lot of people. But I don't like editing, but it's a lot of fun. When I'm like actually getting into it and getting into the zone, editing can be pretty fun. Though I imagine you're talking about a different editing to like editing AMV style for a video essay, but editing, it's its own thing, right? It's very much its own talent, its own. You have to be in your own mood to edit like that. Violet Evergarden has an amazing story. It's just, we gotta ignore the ages for that show. Oh, Living Dog, don't you know? The moment that you turn it into a picture, the moment you animate it, everything is 18 plus. Age is just a number. Prison is just a room. Death is just a sentence. Or a word, depending on your interpretation. Ultra Kill's memes have spread much farther than the game itself. Where have I heard that before? I can't wait for the day you watch Vinland Saga or any work by Naoki Urasawa. They're going to be 2-hour videos for the analysis. Oh boy. Well, I'm kind of worried about Vinland Saga because when I end up watching it, because obviously I will end up watching it at some point or another, it's going to win one of these polls. If it didn't win the most recent one, which I'm still gathering the data for. But when I go to watch it, since I've explained like openly that I'm a historian and that like I have a history bachelor's, people are going to go into my reactions and analyses to Vinland Saga with a lot of expectations, and I'm going to betray them spectacularly because, as you've seen from this stream alone, I am not deserving of my degree. I am not deserving of it at all. I will not be able to comment nearly as much on the history as you probably want me to. So I'm going to leave all those for the pre-ep prep, so I get to comment on your guys' comments about things that I missed. But we'll see. I'm looking forward to it. Now that I'm building out my pre-ep preps a lot more, and it seems like you guys like the pre-ep preps a little bit longer, I am able to explore a lot more analysis because it's not as like in the wake of the episode. There's a lot of pre-episode like energy, and I get to build off on you guys and really build that out. which is really, really great. I almost forgot to mention this stream, but one thing I wanted to talk about also on here is how much I appreciate you guys for really engaging in this as a community and not just as commenters. Because one thing I was really afraid of when I started this channel is that I would make videos, you guys would make comments, I might respond to the comments, and that would be that. But the most unexpected and the most welcome surprise for me in this channel has been... Hold on, let me make this smaller. Nobata's freaking face is so distracting to me. Good lord, I need to switch this over a little bit. The most surprising thing on my channel and the most heartwarming thing in my channel, believe it or not, has been when I'm looking into the comments and I see somebody responding to somebody else in the comments. And it's always a pleasant surprise for me because here's a little look behind the curtain. I get notifications when you comment on one of my videos, obviously. I get notifications when I reply to your comment and you reply again. I do not get notified when, let's say, Max Godard posted a comment and then Alex replies to that comment. I only get the notification from Max. I do not get notified when somebody replies to a comment thread I was not a part of. So it's always a welcome surprise whenever I'm looking in comments, I see there's a reply and I haven't replied yet. And a lot of times it is Alex. Alex is probably the biggest repeat offender of this amazing event where you keep coming back to a comment section and you actually interact with these different comments. You don't just watch my video, leave your comment, and then wait for the next video. You actually read the other comments and build out a discussion. And that's kind of like my dream of this channel. That would be like my dream come true. If I look in the comments and like every single comment has like replies from like 5 different people, and they're like 10 comment long threads with each comment, with like some known saying, "Ooh, I really liked when Gojo frickin' tore off his shirt," and Alex is like, "Did you know culturally taking off your shirt is not good in Japan?" And then Theo responds, "Oh, but it fits Gojo's character and actually represents his character growth." And then Max Godard goes, "Well, when you really think about it in the context of the power system, Gojo taking off his shirt is representative of his ego growing stronger, showing that he is actually the strongest character in the story." And then some known goes and replies to that and says, "What are you talking about ego? The story is about animal abuse." And it just keeps going like that, right? That would be my dream come true. And that's asking a lot of you guys, I get it. Like, you guys would have to like keep coming back to this video and like looking at different comments after you've watched it. So I'm not asking you to do that per se. But that's like my dream, is that I just get to look at this, like my comment section as like a forum board, and like everyone's having their own little discussions based on these comments. That's incredible. That's so much fun. So Alex, yeah, whenever you're like responding to people's comments, and like even if you just say like, "That was a cool thought," it puts the biggest smile on my face, because you probably left your comment before they left theirs, but you chose to go back, look at these comments, and you comment on them. You build out this community, this discussion. And that's so fun to me. I love that. I love that. It's so cool seeing this community build together. And that's why I probably will get to the Discord thing sooner rather than later, so we can have that not be tailored to either streams or episodes, because that is the limitation, right? Right now, there's no like forum board on YouTube where like comment whatever you want. So that could be what Discord is. People could just like say random things, like build out random discussions. That could be really fun. So honestly, I'm probably going to work on that this week, because the more I think about it, the more excited I am for that. So look forward to that coming out. But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you. And on that, Alex says, "You're doing great. Give yourself credit. It's just we're overwhelming you with different tangents on the top of the topic." Well, thank you for that, first of all. But yeah, thank you. I give myself credit. I just prefer spending more time thanking you guys, because it would not be the same without you guys. It truly, truly wouldn't. We're the Itadori and Nanami for your Mahito. Left, right, left, right. Okay, now I need to make that edit now where you just got Max and some no and just pasted over the image of Itadori and Nanami from season 1, just bam, 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 and I'm just in the middle going ooh, 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 ooh. I'm just getting my butt whooped. I can't deal with all these comments. God, it is. I am drowning in substance. I am drowning in value. And that's why you guys are so incredible. You guys are giving me the greatest problem I could possibly have, where I'm drowning in valuable comments to read. And I can't respond to all of them because I don't have the mental energy to formulate responses for them. So I can just heart them to show you that I read it. And if you didn't know, by the way, that's how you know if I've hearted your comment, I've read it. So that's kind of my little signal that I read it. And that is not just something random that I don't think deserves a heart, which happens very rarely, but oh dear. Some known is plotting. You made an imaginary comment thread about Gojo taking off his shirt, and I totally would want to imagine that. It makes sense, not gonna lie. Right? I mean, first of all, I know you guys. I know what you guys comment, but that would be so much fun, right? You do want to imagine it, and it does make sense because it would be really cool. It would take a lot of effort on your guys' part. You'd have to keep coming back to these comments to see something you want to comment on, but it'd be so cool to have like discussion forum like that in my comment section. And I get to be an arbiter of it all. Anyways, that's because there's so many interesting things in people's opinions. Absolutely. Ooh, some known pressuring Alex. What do you think is the significance of wearing something over the torso on a beach? Ooh. Wearing clothing on the torso at the beach can be an emotional defense mechanism. This behavior often stems from deep body insecurity or social anxiety. That's true. However, Alex, I'm calling out your blind spot. One very important thing is that it's not only emotional, it's also a physical defense mechanism. Some people have very sensitive skin, like me in particular, so I would like to wear something so I don't get sunburns everywhere. Why don't you wear sunscreen? Because I'm lazy. That's it. Brainjackery, Gregan will not only beat the time traveler allegations, he's not beating the mind reader allegations either. I'm not a mind reader. I told you. I'm not reading your minds. I'm remembering what you've said in the future. Allegedly. Natural, like Gojo's shredded, non-fat abs. No, that's the real reason he got locked away. He needs more fat. JJK is already too shredded. It can't stand somebody like Gojo being around. Adri Gregan's never being the disembodied brain allegations. Oh my god. Now Retro Capital doesn't even have to be here anymore, does he? He just lives on through every comment, through every live stream, just through the brainjackery nonsense. Get out of here, you guys, with that. There is no picture evidence of me being a disembodied brain, okay? Greganus sounds like an ancient philosopher. Oh my. My JJ could cut. Some known. Please elaborate. My JJK discussion is too lobstery. Like the saying goes. What? Is this me? Am I in the wrong here? What saying are you talking about? What saying where is something too lobstery? I have so many questions and I don't know if it's my ass being shown or if my lobster is too buttery is the reference. Okay, so alternatively, my butter is too lobstery. I see. So your JJK discussion has too much fat is what you're saying. Okay. Well, like commenter, like discussion. Okay, I asked Max Godard for his tolerance. I didn't ask you, Sumknown. You just had to catch some strays. I'm sorry about that. It's sorry, not sorry. Sumknown, wearing clothes on the torso at the beach can be an emotional defense mechanism. That's far from psychological perspective, but that can also be a physical reason. Oh, Alex, your mind is still too limited, though. Protection from the sun is a physical defense mechanism, but it is psychological because it actually reveals a lot about your character. For you see, if somebody wears a shirt specifically to cover themselves in order to have a physical response, that means that they are A, incredibly worried about getting sunburned, but also too lazy, as I said, to put on sunscreen. Or perhaps they have some sort of response to sunscreen and their evolution has been to put on something to cover themselves. Why didn't they just stay inside? Why didn't they stay under shade? They could have brought a parasol, but they chose a shirt. Make of that what you will. Everything's psychological if you spew enough bullshit. That should be my channel. That should be my channel quote right there. My summary. He messed that sea cucumber up pretty bad. I should just stop reading Sumknown's comments. Every time I go back and try to make sense of it, he just says the weirdest, strangely marine-esque thing. And I have to wonder what the context is. Is he talking about Gojo? I mean, who would win? Holder of the Six Eyes and Infinity Domain, or one sea cucumbery boy? The world may never know. Gojo wearing that, along with the lack of fan service to JJK, can be interpreted as Gege trying to move away from a lust-filled world, the second strongest curse after love. Now that is a belief I can get behind, Sumknown. Now that is psychological. And it's more than psychological, it's thematic, right? He tore off his shirt, not for psychological reasons for himself, but as a commentary from Gege, as a commentary about nudism and about how we view characters through the male, or in this case, the female, or it's Gojo in this case, the male gaze, right? So the shredded Gojo shirt discussion will inevitably come to be, a fixed point in the timeline. It's a canon event, Max Godard. I hate to break it to you, but it's a canon event, partially because it already happened. And because I willed it into existence. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I am the prophesizer. Sure, we'll go with that. Perhaps scars in another place and not in the forehead. I don't like that implication, Alex. The scar is gone, has been in the body so long. If that were the case, Living Dog, I would agree. I'll have to make some Kenjakuri art to aid my agenda. Sumknown, if you make Kenjakuri art, you simply must show it with the class pics or it didn't happen. Future brain jackery Gregan is talking through us to this channel. Close. Future AI brain jackery is talking to you through the channel. But you're on the right track. So I'll give you partial credit. Gojo only trusted two things for protection: his jacket and Geto. After losing Geto, all he could do was hide from the light. He lost Geto, so when he took off his shirt, it's proving that he is making himself vulnerable. He is leaving himself open for attack. Look at this. We can ramble about literally anything. I'm starting to believe you really are brain controlling a dead person. That's how Kenjaku respond. No. Okay, now you all are ganging up on me. Come on, you guys. Why are you being mean? You're hurting my feelings. I will say this now, and I will say this forever, and I'm sure wherever he is, Retro Capital is laughing upon his throne of brain jackeries. I am me, your old friend. A self-made prophecy, or rather, a curse. A curse, you say? He said the C word. Jingle, 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 jingle. JJK viewers, come back, come back. He said the C word. He said curse. Wait, do I hear a domain? I think I hear a domain. Someone will arrive and think we're seriously discussing this, and they'd be right. That's the beauty of the streams, right? They just eventually devolve into complete nonsense, depending on when the streamer chooses to end it. That's usually why I end it before this point, so it doesn't just veer off into nothingness. But, I mean, if you wanted something to not veer off into nothingness, you'd watch one of my videos. I think we deserve a little bit of nothingness here and there. Filler, if you would. Oh god, I've become the very thing I swore to destroy. What have I done? Look at what Gojo wore over. He lost Geto 2 layers over his torso. Okay, some known. I told you to like make a paragraph about this. I didn't mean for you to make it like live in the chat. He's just busting out this thing right now while it's fresh in his mind. Forget putting it in one of the comments section. He's already got it. And I mean, go ahead, man. You do you. I'm not going to stop you. Just you wait for the comment. And there's going to be no context for it. And we all need to make a promise right now that we will not elaborate for anybody why that comment exists. And it must explicitly be somewhere where it does not belong. For maximum confusion. I will put it in the replies to other comments. Create your own copy pasta that will be repeated 20 years from now, long after the name Sumknown is forgotten. That's the way you can do it. That's the way to do it. Also, I know you know pretty much nothing about Hajime Kashimo, but I'm so hyped over him getting animated. I assume I'm going to learn more about him as the season progresses because we just got introduced to him, or he was just teased for the manga fanboys, but I'm excited. He seems pretty cool. 400-year-old badass who wants to square up against Sukuna of all people. I mean, count me the freak in. And he had just such an interesting rule. I can't wait to see what happens there. I can't wait to see how that evolves from here. Gojo and the Sea Cucumber sounds like some old Japanese folk tale. Yeah. Yeah. I hate how accurate that sounds. Oh, good lord. Okay. Okay. I think I'm gonna probably end off this stream here, assuming no one has anything they want to throw out of left field to put me on another tangent again. I'm gonna cut things off here. Just need to learn some old Japanese prose to sell to the point. There you go. All right, so thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for being here for another stream. I am going to try to make this weekly. I'll actually try to stick to it. Obviously, there's been unforeseen circumstances that have kept that from happening lately, but I should be able to get back into it moving forward, and I'm getting more interested, and I'm getting back into making out more videos. So yeah, we'll look forward to that probably next Saturday. There's a chance I won't be able to do next Saturday because I might be back in Chicago, kind of moving my stuff back. But if I'm not streaming this next Saturday, then it'll be the one after. Again, 1 p.m. Pacific time. Unless you guys have a better time you'd like, then I'm open to suggestions. I'll probably make a post about that. But regardless, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here and dealing with this randomness. I swear there was a point to this stream. It's probably in the title somewhere. I don't know. Maybe I'll find it when I'm editing. But I've got a lot I can sort through. I've got 3.5 hours of footage now. I'll sort through eventually. So thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed, Alex. So thank you all for being here. I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you all for enjoying my show, my channel, and for interacting with it and making the channel what it is. It wouldn't be the same without you. You'll get tired of hearing it. I won't get tired of saying it. Thank you. So until the next one, whether you like watching JJK, Freerin, everything in between, or neither is fine too. I don't know why you're here, but neither is fine too. Wherever I see you next, have a lovely rest of your day.